My wife of 40 years, Isabella, demanded a divorce. She also wanted the house, 70% of our savings, and 5 years of alimony. I looked at the papers, completely stunned. Isabella, I stammered, I'll have to get a lawyer. She laughed. It wasn't the laugh I remembered from our wedding day. This was cold, sharp, like breaking glass. A lawyer, she mocked. Don't be ridiculous, Ben. You're just a retired teacher. Your pension barely covers the bills. You can't afford a lawyer. She was right. I couldn't. I was just a 70-year-old high school history teacher who thought his life was settled. But she was also wrong. She forgot who I used to teach. So when Isabella walked into that courtroom flanked by her expensive attorney looking like she'd already won, she saw the man standing next to me, and she froze. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, I need to know you're with me. Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm Ben, and this is the story of how my 40-year marriage ended and how my life truly began. It started on a Tuesday. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the one we bought together back in 1985. My hands were stained with ink from the crossword puzzle. Isabella walked in. She wasn't Isabella, my wife. She was Isabella Carter, real estate magnate. She wore a sharp navy blue suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. She didn't say hello. She just dropped a thick manila envelope on the table. The sound it made was heavy final. I want a divorce, Ben. I just stared. I must have looked pathetic, my mouth open, the crossword pen still in my hand. What, a divorce? She repeated, checking her watch. My lawyer, Mr. Shaw, has drawn up the papers. It's all very standard. I opened the envelope. My hands were trembling. I scanned the pages. Irreconcilable differences. Petition for dissolution. Then I saw the terms. Isabella, this says, you get the house. She sighed like I was a slow student who couldn't grasp the basic facts. Of course I get the house, Ben. I'm the one who's been paying the mortgage for the last 20 years with my commissions. You just contributed your teacher's salary. The words stung. Just a teacher's salary. That salary had paid for our groceries for 40 years. It paid for our daughter Emily's first car. It paid for the family vacations Isabella was always too busy to go on. I remembered when we bought this house in Lincoln Park. It was 1988. It was a wreck. I was the one who tore out the old drywall. I was the one who laid the hardwood floors in the living room, board by board, while she was just starting her career. Back then, we were a team. Now she looked at me like I was just another piece of old furniture she was liquidating. What about the savings? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It's in the papers, she said dismissively. I get 70% and 5 years of alimony. The blood drained from my face. 70% alimony. She was the one making millions. This couldn't be real. Isabella, wait, I said, trying to sound reasonable, trying to find the woman I knew. We have nearly $1 million in our retirement account. I've seen the statements. She cut me off. The mask of civility dropped. We had $1 million, Ben. The market collapsed. I made some bad investments trying to grow it. It's gone. Gone, I felt the room spin. All of it, not all of it, she said, as if this was a minor detail. There's about $50,000 left. My lawyer says 70-30 is fair. I'll take $35,000, you get 15. $15,000 for 40 years of work, for 40 years of grading papers until midnight, for 40 years of giving everything to this family. And the alimony, I asked, dreading the answer. $2,000 a month. For 5 years. It's standard. I did the math in my head. My teacher's pension after 40 years in the Chicago public school system was $2,200 a month. If I paid her $2,000, I would be left with $200. $200, I said out loud. Isabella, I can't live on $200 a month. I can't even rent a room in this city. And that's when she laughed. The laugh I mentioned earlier. It was cold and sharp, and it echoed in our beautiful sunlit kitchen. That sounds like your problem, Ben. Not mine. You should have saved more. You shouldn't have just been a teacher. I'll have to get a lawyer, I stammered the words, feeling like ash in my mouth. With what money, she sneered. You can't afford one. My lawyer will tear you apart. Just sign the papers, Ben. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Don't be a fool. She picked up her expensive purse, straightened her suit jacket, and walked out the front door, leaving me alone at the table with the ruins of my life. I sat there for an hour, just frozen. My mind was white noise. My first coherent thought was Emily. My daughter. Our only child. She would know what to do. She wouldn't let this happen. I fumbled with my phone, my fingers clumsy from age and shock. I called her. Dad. Her voice sounded distant, strained. Emily, honey, your mother, she's divorcing me. There was a pause. It wasn't a shocked pause. It was a calculated one. I know, Dad. I'm really sorry you had to find out this way. Find out this way, you knew Mom talked to me and Patrick last week, she said, her voice dropping. We were hoping she'd wait. Emily, the terms, she's taking everything. The house, the savings. She said the money is gone. She said there's only $50,000 left. There was shuffling on the other end, then a man's voice. Patrick, my son-in-law, the accountant. Dad, Ben, he said, using that overly familiar tone I always hated. Patrick here. Look, I reviewed the numbers with Isabella, and I pleaded. I needed an ally. I needed someone to tell me this was a nightmare. And she's right, he said. His voice was firm, clinical. The investments, they didn't pan out. It was a high-risk portfolio. It's gone. To be honest, $50,000 is pretty much all that's left in the liquid accounts. She's actually she's being fair by offering you $15,000. I couldn't breathe. An accountant. My son-in-law, the man I trusted with my own tax returns, was confirming the lie. He was in on it. Patrick, how? Look, Dad, Ben, I gotta go. We're late for a meeting. Just listen to Isabella. She knows what she's doing. It'll be easier if you just sign. The line clicked. He had hung up on me. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. The floor I had installed. They were all in on it. My wife, my daughter, my son-in-law. This wasn't a divorce. It was a conspiracy. A coup. I walked down to my basement office, my sanctuary. The walls were lined with history books, biographies of Lincoln, of Grant, of Douglas, men who had faced betrayal, who had fought impossible odds. I sat in my old worn leather chair. I looked at a framed photo on my desk. Emily, age 6, sitting on my shoulders at a Cubs game. Her smile was wide, trusting. I remembered when she and Patrick wanted to buy their first house in Evanston. They were short $30,000 for the down payment. Isabella had scoffed. Let them save like we did, she'd said. But I had gone to the bank. I had taken $30,000 from my personal inheritance, the money my own father left me, and I gave it to them. Just pay me back when you can, honey, I'd told Emily. No rush. They never paid it back. And now they were helping her mother throw me out with $15,000 to my name. They weren't just standing by. They were active participants. Patrick, the accountant, was the one covering her tracks. He was the one who made the lie sound real. I felt something shift inside me. The shock was fading. The profound, bottomless sadness was turning into something else, something cold and hard. It was anger. I was 70 years old. I was a retired teacher, but I wasn't a fool, and I wasn't going to let them destroy me. Isabella had said I couldn't afford a lawyer. She was right. But she had forgotten one thing. She had forgotten Jonathan. I tried to find my voice. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table, the wood smooth and familiar under my palms. I installed this table. I fixed it when the leg wobbled. Isabella, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The savings. The retirement account. We have nearly $1 million. I've seen the statements from Fidelity. I get them in the mail every quarter. Isabella sighed a deep, annoyed sound, as if I was the most tedious man on earth. We had $1 million, Ben. She emphasized the word had, as if she were correcting a misbehaving student. What are you talking about? She finally looked at me, her eyes flat, devoid of any warmth. The market, Ben. It collapsed. I tried to move things around. I tried to recoup the losses, but it was a bad year. A terrible year. I've been managing this mess for months, trying to protect what little we had left. I don't understand. I still get the statements. They look fine. Those are just paper values, Ben, she said, waving her hand dismissively. You don't understand complex portfolios. The assets are leveraged. It's complicated. She tapped the document she had thrown on the table. The point is, it's gone. We failed. I failed. All that's left in our joint account is $50,000. 50,000. I sank into the chair. My mind reeled. $1 million. 40 years of careful saving, of me putting aside 10% of every single paycheck, of me grading papers on weekends instead of going golfing. All of it. Gone. Isabella continued, her voice brisk, all business. I've been more than fair. The 50,000 will be split. I'll take 35, you get 15. And I'm only asking for 2,000 a month in alimony. For 5 years. It's incredibly generous, considering. I didn't hear most of it. I was stuck on the numbers. My mind, the mind of a teacher, started doing the math. My pension. My 40-year pension from the Chicago public school system. It was $2,200 a month. It wasn't much, but combined with our savings, it was supposed to be enough. It was supposed to be our comfortable retirement. Now, $2,200. Minus $2,000 for her. I was left with $200. $200 a month. How am I supposed to live on $200 a month, I asked. The question came out as a whisper. I couldn't even rent a room. I couldn't buy groceries. I couldn't afford my heart medication. Isabella, I can't. She looked at me, and that's when she laughed. That cold, sharp laugh that I will never, ever forget. That's your problem, Ben, not mine. You should have saved more. You shouldn't have just been a teacher. I'll have to get a lawyer, I stammered. The words felt like ash in my mouth. With what money, she sneered. You have $15,000 to your name. My lawyer, Mr. Shaw, charges $1,000 an hour. He'll burn through that before you even sit down for a deposition. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. Sign the papers, Ben. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Don't be a fool. She picked up her expensive purse, straightened her suit jacket, and walked out the front door. I sat there staring at the papers. The ink on the page blurred through the sudden tears in my eyes. I finally understood. This wasn't a divorce. It wasn't a negotiation between two partners at the end of their life together. This was a financial execution, and I was the one on the chopping block. Isabella slammed the front door. The sound echoed through the high-ceilinged foyer, rattling the framed photo of our wedding day on the mantelpiece. I stood there rooted to the kitchen floor I had tiled myself, my hands still smelling faintly of newsprint and ink. The papers were still on the table. A death certificate for a 40-year marriage. $15,000. $200 a month to live on. It wasn't a divorce. It was an eviction. It was an execution. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. I couldn't breathe. I looked around the kitchen at the life we had built. The custom cabinets I had hung. The bay window I had installed so she could have an herb garden. It was all a lie. But Emily, my daughter, our daughter, she wouldn't let this happen. She loved me. I fumbled for my phone on the granite counter, my fingers clumsy with age and shock. I scrolled past Isabella, and my thumb hovered over Emily. She was 38. She was my little girl. I had taught her how to ride a bike on this very street. I had held her when she cried over her first breakup. She would be horrified. She would march right over here and confront her mother. She would be my ally. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Dad. Her voice was strained, distant. Not the warm "Hi, Daddy" I was used to. Emily, honey, thank God. I didn't know who else to call. I could hear background noise, a television, the sounds of her own children playing. What's wrong, Dad? You sound awful. The words spilled out of me, a torrent of panic and confusion. It's your mother. She's divorcing me. She just left. She gave me these papers, Em. There was a pause. It wasn't a shocked pause. It wasn't the sound of someone gasping for air. It was a heavy, knowing silence. I know, Dad. The 3 words hit me harder than Isabella's laugh. What do you mean you know Mom? Mom talked to me and Patrick last week. She told us she was planning on it. We were hoping she'd wait. We were hoping it wouldn't be so messy. Messy, I almost shouted into the phone. Messy, Emily, she's taking everything. She's taking the house. She said all our savings are gone. Nearly $1 million gone. She said, there's only 50,000 left, and I only get 15 of it. I was breathing heavily now, pacing the kitchen. She's leaving me with $200 a month. $200 I can't even buy food, let alone find a place to live. She said I can't afford a lawyer. Honey, you have to talk to her. This is insane. There was shuffling on the other end. I heard her muffled voice. Here, just take it. Let me talk to him. Then a new voice. A voice I'd come to tolerate but never truly trusted. Patrick, my son-in-law, the accountant. Dad Ben. He always called me Dad Ben. It always sounded so insincere. Patrick put Emily back on the phone. I need to talk to my daughter. Hey, just calm down for a second, okay? Emily's a little upset by all this. I actually reviewed the numbers with Isabella. My blood went cold. What, I'm an accountant, Dad Ben. She wanted a professional opinion before she presented this. I looked at the books. And she's right. Right, I gripped the phone tighter. How is this right? His voice was smooth, clinical, as if he were discussing a quarterly report, not the destruction of my life. The investments. They were high risk. Tech stocks, some overseas funds. They didn't pan out. It was a massive loss. To be honest, 50,000 is pretty much all that's left in the liquid accounts. The market was brutal. I leaned against the wall. The lie was perfect. Isabella, the real estate shark, and Patrick, the numbers man. They had built an airtight story. But $1 million doesn't just evaporate, Patrick. It does when it's leveraged, Dad Ben. You wouldn't understand the specifics. It's complex financial instruments. He was patronizing me, just like she did. He continued. Look, I know this is a shock, but honestly, Isabella is being pretty generous offering you $15,000 in alimony. Technically, since the investments were joint, she could have just left you with your share of the debt. Generous. He called her generous for leaving me with $200 a month. I have to go, Patrick. I hung up the phone before he could say another word. I stood in the silent kitchen. The sun was streaming in through the bay window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. They knew. My daughter Emily knew for a week. She knew her mother was planning to destroy me, and she did nothing. Worse. She let her husband, the accountant, help her. He was the one who just confirmed the lie. He was the one who just called my execution generous. I thought back to 5 years ago. Patrick had made a bad trade and lost his job. They were about to lose their condo. I had taken $60,000 from my retirement account, the money Isabella and Patrick now said was gone, and I gave it to them. It's not a loan, I had told them. It's a gift. Family helps family. Family helps family. I looked at the divorce papers on the table. I was alone. I had no wife. I had no daughter. I had no allies. It was me against all of them. I felt something shift inside me. The shock was fading. The profound, bottomless sadness was turning into something else, something cold and hard. It was anger. I was 70 years old. I was a retired teacher, but I wasn't a fool, and I wasn't going to let them destroy me. Isabella was right about one thing. I couldn't afford a lawyer, but she was wrong about everything else. She had forgotten Jonathan. I hung up the phone. The silence of the basement office was absolute, heavier and more suffocating than any noise. For 40 years, this room had been my sanctuary. The walls were lined with books floor to ceiling, biographies of Lincoln, volumes on the Civil War, first editions I had saved for years to buy. It smelled of old paper pipe tobacco and the leather of my worn-out armchair. It was the only room in the house that Isabella hadn't modernized or remodeled into something cold and white. It was the only room that still felt like mine. And now I was a prisoner in it. I sat in my chair, staring at the phone I had just dropped into its cradle. Patrick's voice echoed in my head. She's being generous. Generous. My gaze drifted to the cluttered desk. Tucked between a stack of ungraded papers from my last semester and a model of a Civil War cannon, there was a small silver frame. I picked it up. It was Emily. She was 16, grinning, holding up a set of car keys. Our old 1992 Volvo. I remembered that day. She had been terrified of the highway. I spent 8 straight weekends with her, driving up and down the I-94, my knuckles white on the passenger door handle, patiently saying, "Easy on the clutch, honey. You got this." When she finally got her license, she had hugged me so tight, I thought my ribs would crack. "Thanks, Daddy. You're the best." I traced the glass over her smiling face. The girl who had known for a week that her mother was about to leave me destitute. My eyes moved to another photo. Emily and Patrick at their wedding. I'd paid for half of it. I remembered Patrick, younger, more eager to please, shaking my hand. I remembered the call 3 years later. Patrick had been in a motorcycle accident. He'd been reckless, trying to show off for his friends. Emily had called me hysterical. Isabella was at a conference in Miami. "She can't be reached," Emily had cried. So I went. I sat in the sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting room at Northwestern Memorial for 12 straight hours. I was the one who talked to the surgeons. I was the one who held Emily's hand when they said he was out of surgery. I was the one who paid for the private room his insurance wouldn't cover. I was Dad Ben, the reliable, boring, stable rock they both leaned on. And now, generous. I put the photo down, my hand shaking. I thought of the biggest betrayal. It wasn't just the lie about the money. It was the money I had given them. It was 6 years ago. My own mother had passed and left me $80,000. It was all she had. I put 50,000 of it into a separate CD, my just-in-case fund. Emily and Patrick had found their dream condo in Evanston. They were short on the down payment. I remember sitting at this very kitchen table. Isabella had been firm. "They're adults, Ben. Let them figure it out. Taking on debt builds character." But Emily had tears in her eyes. "We'll lose it, Dad. The bank needs the answer by Friday." So I had gone to my bank. I had cashed in my mother's inheritance. I wrote them a check for $50,000. "This isn't a loan," I had told them, holding Emily's hands. "It's a gift. Family helps family. Just promise me you'll be happy." Family helps family. Now that same family was helping my wife throw me out onto the street with $15,000 to my name. They weren't just bystanders. They were accomplices. Patrick, the accountant, hadn't just looked at the numbers. He had approved them. He had put his professional stamp on her lie. He was the one who made the story airtight. The shock that had frozen my veins for the last hour finally began to thaw, and underneath it, something else was stirring. It was hot. It was a cold, pure anger. I felt old. I felt tired. I felt like a fool. But I was not useless. I was a history teacher. I have spent my entire life teaching kids that empires don't fall overnight. They are eaten away from the inside. By betrayal. By greed. By arrogance. And Isabella, Patrick, and Emily, they were arrogant. They thought I was just a clueless old man. They thought I was a relic, just part of the house to be disposed of. They thought I would just sign the papers and disappear. I looked at the divorce agreement on my desk. I picked it up, and I tore it in half. I wouldn't sign. Not today. Not ever until I knew the truth. Isabella had made a mistake. She had left me in my room surrounded by my books, my memories, and 40 years of history. She thought she had taken away all my resources. She thought I couldn't afford a lawyer. She was right. I couldn't afford a lawyer. But I wasn't thinking of a lawyer. My eyes scanned the bookshelves, past the biographies, past the war histories, to the row of faded blue and gold high school yearbooks. I pulled one out. Lincoln High, class of 1995. I flipped through the pages, past the smiling, hopeful faces, until I found the one I was looking for. There he was. Jonathan Rook. 15 years old, with defiant eyes, messy hair, and a smirk that got him sent to my office every other week. I had failed with my own daughter, but I had not failed with him. I picked up the phone. I wasn't just a teacher anymore. I was a man with a lesson to give, and class was about to be in session. I heard the garage door rumble open. It was just after 6 o'clock. Isabella was home. I was still in the basement office, the torn divorce papers sitting on my desk like a failed exam. I hadn't moved for hours. I felt cold, hollowed out. I heard her heels click on the hardwood floor above me, the sound of the refrigerator opening, the clink of a wine glass. She was celebrating. I took a deep breath. My anger had subsided, leaving only a cold, heavy dread. I had to face her. I had to understand the betrayal of my daughter. I walked up the basement stairs. Each step felt like lifting a lead weight. She was in the kitchen, leaning against the marble island, sipping a glass of white wine. She looked perfectly composed, her expensive suit still immaculate, not a hair out of place. She glanced at me, then at the empty spot on the counter, where she had left the envelope. "You're still here," she said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I thought you'd be gone, or at least have the decency to sign the papers." I talked to Emily, I said. My voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Isabella didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of her wine. Good. Then she knows. It saves me a phone call. You told her I asked the last bit of hope dying. You told her you were doing this. You told her about the money. She let out an exasperated sigh, the kind she used to use when I'd forgotten to take out the trash. Of course I told her, Ben. She's our daughter. She had a right to know what, that you're leaving her father with nothing, that you're throwing him out. She finally turned to face me and her eyes were cold. She had a right to know that I have been carrying this family financially for 20 years. She had a right to know that her father, the man she's always looked up to, was just a passenger. She had a right to know that I tried. God, how I tried. She put the wineglass down, and for a moment, she almost looked convincing. She put her hand to her temple as if nursing a terrible headache. Do you have any idea what it's like, Ben, the pressure, knowing that your teacher's pension wasn't going to be enough for us to retire on? Knowing that if I didn't do something, we'd end up as old people living on Social Security, unable to help our own daughter. I thought we were fine, I stammered. I thought the $1 million was... The $1 million was stagnant, she snapped. It was just sitting there losing value to inflation. I tried to make it grow, Ben. I tried to turn it into 2 million, 3 million. For us, for Emily, for our grandchildren. She was pacing now, her performance growing. I took risks. Yes, high risk, high reward. Patrick understood. He's an accountant. He knows you have to be aggressive. And it didn't work. She stopped and looked at me, her eyes glistening with what I like a fool mistook for tears. It failed, Ben. All of it. I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to secure our future. She walked over to me, her voice softening. Do you think you're the only one who's hurting? I'm the one who has to live with that failure. I'm the one who lost our nest egg. I'm the one who had to tell our daughter that the money is gone. She was good. She was brilliant. She was taking her own crime, her theft, and twisting it. She was reframing it as a tragic mistake, a failed gamble she had taken for me. And in that moment I felt a terrible, crushing wave of guilt. What if she was right? What if I was just a clueless old man who didn't understand finance? What if she had tried her best, and I was now blaming her for a simple human failure? I didn't know, Isabella. You never told me. I didn't want to worry you, she cried. I didn't want you to see me as a failure. I've been carrying this shame for months. And now I'm just tired. I'm broken, Ben. I can't be your provider anymore. I can't be the strong one. She leaned against the counter, the picture of a defeated woman. The divorce. The $50,000. It's all that's left. I'm trying to be fair, to just end this. I can't keep pretending we're the perfect couple when I'm dying inside from what I lost. I looked at her, this stranger who had been my wife. My anger was gone, replaced by a confused pity. I had come up those stairs ready for a fight, and she had disarmed me completely. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't understand. I know, she said, her voice soft again. You never did. You were always in your basement with your books. It's okay. She picked up her wineglass. Just sign the papers, Ben. Let's not drag this out. Let me try to have some peace. She walked past me and went upstairs to the master bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. I stood alone in the kitchen. I believed her. Almost. I accepted her explanation. I accepted that she had failed, that she was ashamed, that she was hurting too. But as I turned to go back down to my basement, a tiny nagging thought, sharp as a splinter, lodged itself in my brain. If she was so devastated by her failure, If she was so ashamed, why had she been laughing when she told me I couldn't afford a lawyer? I went back down to the basement. My basement. The air was cool and smelled of old paper pipe tobacco and the faint sweet scent of mildew. For 40 years, this room had been my sanctuary. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with my books, biographies of Lincoln, volumes on the Civil War, first editions I had saved for years to buy. It was the only room in the house that Isabella hadn't modernized, the only room that still felt like mine. Now it was just a tomb I had to excavate. She wanted me out in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to pack up 40 years of a life. I looked at the towering shelves. Where do you even begin? I felt that wave of guilt again. The one she had planted so skillfully just an hour ago. She was right. I was just a history teacher. I didn't understand her high-stakes world of real estate and investments. She had tried, she had failed, and now I was blaming her. I was the fool. I had to start somewhere. I pulled an old cardboard box from the bottom shelf. It was heavy, the bottom sagging. Lincoln's Generals, the label read, written in my own faded black marker. I hadn't opened this box in a decade. I set it on the floor with a heavy grunt. Dust plumed into the air, dancing in the single shaft of light from the small window. I had to pack my books, my notes, my maps. These were the only things I truly owned. Everything else, the house, the furniture, Isabella had made it clear it was hers. I pulled the box away from the wall, and I saw something else. It was stuck wedged between the wooden shelf and the cold concrete foundation. It looked like an old thick envelope, the kind banks use for important documents. It was stiff, warped from the damp. I almost threw it out. It was probably just old tax returns. But curiosity, the one thing a history teacher never loses, made me tug it free. It wasn't sealed. The metal clasp on the back was rusted shut. I had to use my old pocket knife, the one I used for opening boxes, to pry it open. Inside there wasn't much, just a thin stack of papers held together by a paper clip that had long since rusted, leaving a dark brown stain on the top page. It was a bank statement. I squinted at it in the dim basement light. The logo wasn't familiar. Not Chase. Not Bank of America. It was Cayman National Trust. The Cayman Islands. Why in the world did we have mail from the Cayman Islands? I looked at the name on the account. IC Enterprises. Isabella Carter Enterprises. And then I remembered. It was vague, like a scene from a movie I'd only half watched. It must have been 10, maybe 15 years ago. Isabella had come down here into this very room. I was grading midterms. She was flushed with excitement, talking about a new deal, a new strategy. "Ben, darling," she'd said, her voice bright, "I need you to sign these." She put a stack of papers in front of me, right on top of a student's essay about the Battle of Antietam. "What is it?" I'd asked, my mind still on the battlefield. "Just some standard business incorporation papers. It's for a new holding company. It protects our assets. It's just a formality." I remember the smell of her perfume, expensive and floral. I remember just wanting to get back to my grading. I trusted her. She was the business mind. I was just the teacher. I scribbled my name where she pointed. I never read a single word. IC Enterprises. I looked back at the statement in my hand. My heart was starting to beat faster. It was dated. March 2022. That wasn't long ago. That was only 3 years ago. I scanned the page, my eyes searching for the numbers. Account summary. Deposits. Withdrawals. And then at the bottom, the closing balance. I had to read the number 3 times. My mind, the mind that could remember the exact date of the Louisiana purchase, couldn't process it. $1,429,512.18. $1.4 million. I stood up. The basement suddenly felt 20 degrees colder. I thought back to what she had said just hours ago, her face a mask of tragedy. It failed, Ben. All of it. I lost hundreds of thousands. All that's left is $50,000. I looked at the paper in my hand. $1.4 million. I looked at the memory of her face. $50,000. This statement was 3 years old. If it was that high, then what was the balance now? The pity I had felt for her, the guilt, it vanished. It evaporated in an instant. It was replaced by something else. A cold, hard, anchoring certainty. She hadn't failed. She had lied. She hadn't lost the money. She had hidden it. This wasn't a tragedy. This wasn't a bad investment. This was a theft. I walked back up the stairs. The heavy, damp air of the basement felt like it was clinging to me. My legs, which had felt so weak just an hour ago, were now steady. The tremor in my hands was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was no longer a victim. I was a man who had just found the first clue. She was in the living room, curled up on the $1,000 white sofa, the one I was never allowed to sit on with my teacher clothes. She was reading a glossy magazine, a fresh glass of wine on the coaster beside her. She looked up when I entered, her brow furrowing in mild annoyance. "What is it now, Ben?" "Did you forget where the packing tape is?" I didn't say anything. I just walked across the Persian rug, another one of her expensive purchases, and stood in front of her. I held out the bank statement. The rusted paperclip mark was like a small brown wound. She glanced at it, then back at me, impatient. I asked the question. My voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. "What is IC Enterprises? And what is this $1.4 million? I saw it. It happened in less than a second, faster than a camera shutter." Her eyes widened. The color drained from her face. I saw her pupils dilate in pure animal panic. Her breath hitched. She knew exactly what that paper was. And then just as quickly the mask slammed back down. She laughed. It wasn't her cold, cruel laugh from the kitchen. This one was different. It was a high, tinkling, gushing laugh. A performance. It was the laugh she used with wealthy clients. "Oh, Ben," she said, putting a hand to her chest, as if I had just told a delightful joke. "My goodness, where did you dig that up from? I thought I threw all that old paperwork out years ago." She put her magazine down and looked at me with an expression of profound, patronizing pity. "Honey," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "this is exactly why I told you not to worry your head about these things." "What is it, Isabella?" "This," she tapped the paper with a perfectly manicured nail. "This is nothing. It was a shell corporation I set up years ago for an overseas deal. An investment." She said the word investment the same way she had said it before. The word she used to explain where our $1 million had disappeared to. "But it says $1.4 million. I insisted, my grip tightening on the paper. "It said Ben." Said. Past tense. She corrected me again, just like a teacher would. "That company failed. It got tangled in some horrible litigation in the Caymans. The money was frozen, then completely wiped out by legal fees. It's gone. It's been gone for years. This piece of paper isn't worth the paper it's printed on. It's worthless." She smiled a sad, knowing smile. This is one of the bad investments I told you about. The one that cost us so much. I was so ashamed of it, I guess I just buried the paperwork and tried to forget. She was good. She was brilliant. She had an answer for everything. She was weaving this new discovery right back into her original lie. But the panic I saw in her eyes, that was the truth. This lie was just the cover story. I looked down at the paper, then back at her. I want to look into this," I said. "I want to see these legal papers." Isabella's smile tightened, the edges cracking. "Ben, what are you going to do? Call the Cayman Islands?" You don't have a lawyer, remember. You don't speak the language of international finance. It's done. It's over. It's just another sad part of the mess I made. She stood up from the sofa, suddenly brisk, all business again. Now give me that. It's painful to even look at. It just brings back bad memories of the failure. She reached for the statement. I pulled it back. No, I said. I want to keep it. Why? She snapped, her voice suddenly losing its sympathetic tone. Why would you want to keep a reminder of how we lost all our money? Because it's mine too, I said, though I didn't know what I meant. Ben, don't be childish. She didn't ask again. Her hand shot out fast as a snake and snatched the papers from my grasp. Her fingers were strong. I was a 70-year-old man, and she was a 65-year-old woman fueled by adrenaline and deceit. I had no chance. Before I could even react, she was marching to the kitchen fireplace. Isabella. No, I shouted, following her. Stop it! Ben, you're upsetting yourself over nothing. She grabbed the fireplace lighter from the mantel, and with a single fluid motion, she lit the corner of the bank statement. The old dry paper caught instantly. She dropped the burning document into the hearth and watched her face illuminated by the small, hungry flame as $1.4 million turned to black, curling ash. She turned to me, brushing her hands together. There, she said. It's gone. No more ghosts. Now please go back to your packing. You're making a mess. I looked at her. Her face was a mask of sad, patient understanding. The performance of a lifetime. It's worthless, Ben, she said softly, her voice dripping with that fake pity. It's just a painful reminder of what I lost. Of what we lost. She reached for the paper, her hand gentle like she was taking a sharp object from a child. Let me get rid of it for you. There's no point in torturing yourself. My hand flinched. I pulled it back just an inch. No, I said. The word was quiet, weak. Her smile froze. Just the edges. No, what do you mean, no, I want to look at it, I said, gaining a fraction of strength. I want to understand it. You said there were legal papers. I want to see the lawsuit that made it worthless. Isabella let out a small, sharp laugh. It wasn't the cruel laugh from before. It was a laugh of genuine disbelief. Ben, you're going to read international litigation documents. You, the man who still balances his checkbook with a pencil. The man who thought diversification was planting different kinds of tomatoes in the garden. The insult was meant to put me back in my box. The box labeled, clueless old teacher. It's still my money, Isabella, I said, surprised at the steel in my own voice. I want to see the papers. Don't be childish, she snapped. Her patience was gone. The mask was cracking. She didn't ask again. Her hand shot out. It wasn't the gentle hand from a moment ago. This was the hand of a businesswoman closing a hostile deal. It was fast as a snake. Her fingers, strong from years of gripping briefcases and signing checks, clamped down on the document. I was a 70-year-old man, startled and slow. She was 65, fueled by adrenaline and deceit. I had no chance. She ripped the statement from my grasp. The old paper tore with a weak, sighing sound. Isabella, no, I yelled. I lunged forward, trying to grab it back, but I was too late. She ripped it in half. Stop it. That's evidence. She ripped it again, lengthwise. And again. Her movements were furious, efficient, terrifying. She wasn't just destroying a piece of paper. She was destroying the truth. She was destroying me. In 10 seconds, the Cayman National Trust statement was reduced to a flurry of tiny confetti-sized pieces. There, she said, breathing heavily. The mask of the sad victim was gone. In her place was a cold, angry stranger. She marched over to the kitchen trash can, the expensive stainless steel one that opened with a motion sensor. She held the fistful of paper scraps over it and opened her hand. They fluttered down, settling on top of yesterday's coffee grounds and an empty wine bottle. She turned back to me, brushing her hands together, a gesture of finality, of dismissal. "Don't," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "ever worry your head about things you don't understand, Ben." She walked to the counter, picked up her keys, and looked at me one last time. "Just sign the divorce papers. Sign them by tomorrow, or I'll make your life even more miserable." She walked out. The front door slammed shut, rattling the wedding photo on the mantel again. I stood there, motionless. My heart was pounding, but my mind was suddenly perfectly clear. She had made a mistake. A fatal mistake. If the paper was truly worthless, she would have laughed and handed it to me. She would have let me waste my time, let me chase a ghost in the Cayman Islands. But she hadn't. She had panicked. She had reacted with violence. She had destroyed the evidence. Her explanation was fast. Too fast. Her actions were faster. The lie was plausible, but the cover-up was sloppy. It was desperate. I walked to the trash can. I stared down at the colorful scraps of paper mixed with the dark, wet coffee grounds. My wife of 40 years, the mother of my child, had just lied to my face, stolen my money, and tried to destroy my future. My gut intuition wasn't just whispering anymore. It was screaming. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after the front door slammed. The silence was absolute, broken only by the steady, arrogant hum of the stainless steel refrigerator. The one she had picked out. I listened. I heard the rumble of the garage door opening and closing. The smooth, powerful engine of her Mercedes fading down the street. She was gone. Off to her lawyer's office to celebrate her victory, or maybe just off to get a celebratory manicure. It didn't matter. My eyes fixed on the trash can, the motion sensor lid, the sleek brushed steel. It was sitting right next to the counter, innocent. But inside, nestled in a bed of that morning's dark, wet coffee grounds and the empty shell of an avocado, was the confetti of my life. My stomach turned. I am 70 years old. I was a respected teacher in this city for 40 years. I have graded 10,000 essays. I have advised the student council, and I was about to dig through my own garbage. The humiliation of it burned in my throat. It was disgusting. But the look on her face when she ripped that paper, that wasn't shame. That wasn't sadness. That was terror. Her violence in destroying it told me one thing. I had to see what was on those pieces. My hands were shaking. Not from age, not anymore. They were shaking with a cold, pure rage. I waved my hand over the sensor. The lid opened with a polite electronic whoosh. The smell of rotting food and stale wine hit me. I didn't care. I plunged my hand deep into the filth. My fingers brushed against something slimy, an eggshell, a wet paper towel. I felt sick, but I kept digging. I grabbed handfuls of the coffee grounds, feeling the tiny torn scraps of paper mixed in. I dumped the entire foul-smelling pile onto a stack of old newspapers I kept by the back door for recycling. My hands were covered in grime. I wanted to vomit, but I had them. I carried the newspapers down to my basement, my sanctuary. I spread them out on my old wooden desk, right next to my meticulously organized models of Civil War battlefields. I turned on my bright fluorescent desk lamp. This was just another puzzle, like my daily crossword, like piecing together fragmented historical accounts from two different sources. This I knew how to do. I spent the next hour meticulously, patiently separating the tiny damp scraps of paper from the black sludge of the coffee grounds. I wiped each piece clean with a paper towel. My hands were stained brown, but I didn't stop. It was like an archaeological dig, finding the fragments of a lost civilization. My lost civilization. She had been thorough. The pieces were tiny. I couldn't put the whole thing back together. But I didn't need the whole thing. I just needed enough. I started arranging the pieces on a clean sheet of white paper. My history teacher eyes, trained to find patterns in chaos, scanned the fragments. There, a piece with a distinctive blue wave in the logo. Man National True. Another piece further down. I carefully moved them with my fingertips. I aligned them. Cayman National Trust. I had a name. My heart was hammering a low, steady drumbeat against my ribs. I kept searching. More fragments. A piece with the letters Enterprises, and another a header fragment. I see. I put them together. I see Enterprises, the name she had dismissed so easily. And then I found it. The most important piece. A fragment from the bottom corner, away from the coffee grounds. Losing balance. 1,029. The rest of the number was torn off. But it was enough. $1.4 million. I leaned back in my chair. The basement suddenly felt 20 degrees colder. Cayman National Trust, IC Enterprises, $1.4 million. This wasn't a failure. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't worthless. This was a crime scene. I fumbled for my old smartphone. My fingers were still trembling, but this time with purpose. I carefully arranged the 3 key pieces on the white paper. The bank name, the account name, the number. I took a photo. Click. The flash illuminated the fragments, stark and undeniable. I took another, and another. I zoomed in. The evidence was blurry, stained, and torn. But it was real. I stared at the photo on my phone. My first instinct was to run upstairs, to call Emily, to show my daughter. Look, Mom lied. But the thought died as soon as it formed. Emily and Patrick. She's being generous, Dad Ben. Patrick, the accountant. He hadn't just looked at the numbers and made a mistake. He had known. He had confirmed the lie. He was in on it. They weren't my allies. They were her allies. I couldn't trust my wife. I couldn't trust my daughter. I couldn't trust my son-in-law. I was surrounded. I looked at the photo. This wasn't enough for the police. This was a complex financial web I could never untangle alone. I was just a teacher. I needed someone who could. I needed someone who was smarter than them. Someone who was more ruthless than them. Someone who owed me. I stood up and walked across my basement past the piles of boxes I was supposed to be packing to the far wall, to the shelf with my old high school yearbooks. I pulled one out. Faded blue and gold. Lincoln High. Class of 1995. My fingers, stained with coffee and grime, flipped through the glossy pages past the smiling, hopeful faces until I found the one I was looking for. There he was, Jonathan Rook, 15 years old with defiant eyes, messy hair, and a smirk that got him sent to my office every other week. I had failed with my own daughter, but I had not failed with him. I picked up my phone. I wasn't just a teacher anymore. I was a man with a lesson to give, and class was about to be in session. I stood in the cold, silent basement. My basement. The photo on my phone screen seemed to glow in the dim light. Cayman National Trust. IC Enterprises. $1.4 million. This was the truth. A dirty, shredded, coffee-stained truth that I had fished out of the kitchen garbage can like a desperate animal. I sank into my old leather armchair, the one with the springs poking through the cushion. I felt the damp cold of the concrete floor seep into my bones. I was 70 years old. My wife of 40 years was actively trying to destroy me. My daughter and my son-in-law were her willing accomplices. Patrick was an accountant. He knew how to hide things, how to make the numbers lie. Isabella was a shark. She knew how to attack, how to go for the throat. And what was I? I was just a teacher, a retired teacher. Isabella's laugh echoed in my head, cold and sharp. You can't afford a lawyer. She was right. I had $15,000 to my name according to her math. In reality, I would have $200 a month after she took her alimony. What lawyer could I possibly hire a new graduate from a strip mall office? They'd be eaten alive. Isabella's lawyer, Mr. Shaw, would tear them apart before they even filed a motion. I was trapped. They had built a perfect cage. They had stolen my past and left me with no future. My eyes scanned the room, my sanctuary, my fortress of knowledge. 40 years of my life packed onto these dusty wooden shelves. Books on the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. Biographies of Churchill and Roosevelt. First editions I had saved for years to buy. And there on the far wall, a long, sagging shelf held my personal history. My yearbooks, 40 years of Lincoln High School. 40 years of faces, thousands of students. They were doctors now, mechanics, soldiers, mothers. I remembered almost all of them. I felt a pull, a strange, illogical urge. I stood up, my old joints cracking in protest. I ran my fingers over the faded blue and gold spines. 1980, 1985, 1990. I stopped at 1995. I pulled the heavy book from the shelf. A cloud of dust smelling of old paper and lost time made me cough. The spine crackled as I opened it. I flipped past the most likely to pages. Most likely to succeed. Most likely to be president. I ignored them. I knew where I was going. I turned to the senior superlatives. And there he was. The photograph was grainy black and white. A kid who looked 15 but was probably 17, having been held back. He had messy spiked hair, a cheap earring in one ear, and a smirk that seemed to defy the entire world. He was wearing a leather jacket in his official school photo. How he'd gotten away with that, I never knew. Underneath his name, the caption his classmates had voted for. Jonathan Rook. Most likely to sue the world. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Johnny Rook. He wasn't just a difficult student. He was my most difficult student. He was the one I had almost failed. The one I had fought for. He was the one Isabella had despised. I remembered her voice, sharp and angry, coming from the kitchen all those years ago. He's a lost cause, Ben. He'll end up in jail or dead before he's 20. Don't waste your time on that trash. You're embarrassing this family. But I hadn't listened. I remembered finding Johnny sleeping in the school boiler room, his face bruised from a fight with his stepfather. I remembered the nights I spent in the local police station vouching for him. I remembered the day I sat him down in this very basement, right where I was standing now, and shoved a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius into his hands. You're smart, Johnny, I had told him, but you're angry, and anger without direction is just noise. You want to fight the world, fine, but use your mind, not your fists. Use these. I had tapped the book. Words are the real weapons. He had gone to college on a scholarship I helped him get. Then law school. I'd heard the rumors over the years that he had become one of the most ruthless, brilliant, and feared litigators in Chicago. A shark, just like Isabella. I hadn't spoken to him in 20 years. He was a stranger now. A multimillionaire who probably didn't even remember the name of his old retired history teacher. This was insane. This was the desperate, pathetic hope of a foolish old man. He would probably have his secretary hang up on me. But what other choice did I have? Isabella had an army. She had my daughter. She had my son-in-law, the accountant. I had $15,000, a garbage bag full of shredded paper, and a closet-sized apartment waiting for me. I looked at the picture of the defiant teenager in the yearbook, most likely to sue the world. I picked up my phone. I had nothing left to lose. It was time to call my old student. It was time to see if I had taught him well enough. It was my last and only gamble. I sat in my basement, but it wasn't the basement of today. It was 30 years ago. I was 40 years old, my hair still thick and dark, my back straight. The room was the same, lined with books, but the air was different. It was filled with the smell of pipe tobacco and the electric hum of the old Apple computer I'd saved for a year to buy. It was a Friday night, 9 o'clock. Isabella was upstairs at a dinner party, one of her first real estate networking events. Emily was at a sleepover. I was doing what I always did. Grading papers. My red pen was flying across an essay about the causes of the Civil War. Paragraph structure, I wrote in the margin. Then the phone rang. The old landline on the wall. Its shrill, piercing ring cut through the silence. I picked it up. Carter Residence. Mr. Benjamin Carter, this is Sergeant O'Malley down at the 18th District. My blood went cold. The first thought is always your child. Is my daughter okay? Your daughter, oh yeah, she's fine. No, I'm calling about a student of yours. You're a teacher at Lincoln High, right? Yes, I said, my heart rate slowing, replaced by confusion. We've got a kid here, 15 years old. Picked him up driving a stolen Acura. He's been in here 3 times this month, Mr. Carter. Trespassing, shoplifting, now grand theft auto. The kid's on a fast track to juvie, and this time he's going to stick. He wouldn't give us his parents' number. He just kept repeating yours. Said, call Mr. Carter. He'll know what to do. I didn't even have to ask the name. Jonathan Rook. I sighed. That's the one, O'Malley said, tired. Look, I'm supposed to just process him. But he's 15, and he asked for you. I'm calling as a courtesy. If you want to talk to him, you've got about an hour before he goes into the system. I hung up. I grabbed my old tweed jacket. I ran upstairs and grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door. I had to tell Isabella I was leaving. I called her cell phone. She picked up on the 3rd ring, her voice bright and artificial over the din of the party. Ben, what is it? Is Emily okay? Emily's fine. It's a student. Jonathan Rook. He's been arrested. Car theft. The line went silent for a second. Then her voice, no longer bright, returned sharp and cold as ice. Jonathan Rook, that trash Ben, are you kidding me? I'm at a dinner with the partners from Vornado. This is important. Isabella, the boy asked for me. He's 15, he's going to juvenile hall. Good, that's where he belongs. He's a lost cause, Ben. He's a thug. I've told you to stop wasting your time on that boy. You're a teacher, not a social worker. Let his deadbeat parents handle it. He doesn't have parents who can, that's the problem. And it's not your problem, she hissed. You're embarrassing us. You're embarrassing me. Do not go down there, Ben. I am ordering you. Do not attach our family name to that kid. It'll ruin our reputation. I stood in the hallway of the house I had paid for, listening to my wife tell me I was an embarrassment for trying to help a child. I have to go, Isabella, I said quietly. Ben, if you walk out that door. I hung up the phone. The drive to the 18th District was short. 10 minutes. My old Volvo rumbled through the dark Chicago streets. I thought about Johnny Rook. He was brilliant. A once-in-a-generation mind trapped inside a ball of pure, unadulterated teenage rage. He saw the world as a fight, and he was determined to lose. I walked into the precinct. The smell of stale coffee, disinfectant, and desperation hit me. Sergeant O'Malley, a man with a face like a worn-out baseball glove, pointed with his thumb. He's in the holding cell. You've got 10 minutes, Mr. Carter. Then he's ours. I walked down the hall. I saw him. He wasn't the defiant kid in the leather jacket. He was just 15. He was sitting on a concrete bench, his head in his hands, his whole body trembling. He was small, skinny, and looked like he hadn't eaten in a day. He was trying not to cry, but failing. He looked up as I approached the bars. His eyes were red-rimmed, full of a terrifying, hopeless bravado. What are you doing here, Mr. Carter? he spat. Come to give me a lecture on the Emancipation Proclamation. My cell phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew it was Isabella. I ignored it. I looked at this angry, brilliant, terrified child. He was just like the fragments of paper in my trash can, torn up, stained, and discarded by everyone as worthless. I stood there until he finally met my gaze. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. I just asked the question. Are you better than this, Johnny? He looked at me, this 15-year-old kid in a holding cell, his eyes full of fire and fear. Are you better than this, Johnny? He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched. I turned to Sergeant O'Malley. I'm bailing him out. What's the bond? O'Malley looked shocked. Mr. Carter, this is grand theft auto. It's not a pack of gum, and besides, he's not your kid. He's my student, I said, pulling out my wallet. What is the bond? My cell phone was vibrating in my pocket. Again and again. I knew it was Isabella. I knew she was furious. I didn't care. The drive home in my old Volvo was the most silent ride of my life. Johnny sat in the passenger seat, rigid, staring out the window, smelling of the holding cell and teenage sweat. He probably expected me to yell, to lecture him, to drive him to his abusive stepfather's house. We pulled into my driveway. He looked at the nice, quiet house in Lincoln Park. Why are we here? He asked, his voice suspicious. This is where I live. You're staying with me tonight. When I opened the front door, Isabella was standing there. She had come home from her party. She was still in her black cocktail dress, her arms crossed. Her face was a mask of pure, cold fury. Ben, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. What have you done? What is he doing in our home? He's a child, Isabella. He has nowhere else to go. He can sleep in the basement office. Absolutely not. I will not have that criminal under my roof. Think of Emily. Think of our reputation. I am thinking. I said, and I heard a strength in my own voice that surprised me. I looked past her at Johnny, who was frozen by the door, ready to bolt. Johnny, go downstairs. Last door on the left. There's a sofa. He vanished down the stairs without a word. I faced my wife. We had the worst fight of our marriage that night. It ended with me sleeping on that same basement sofa and her locking the bedroom door. The next week, I was in a courtroom, not as a defendant, but as a character witness. The judge looked tired. He had a file on Johnny Rook that was already an inch thick. Mr. Carter, I respect you. You're a pillar of this community. But this kid is a menace. He's stolen a car. What do you expect me to do? I stood up. I remembered Isabella's words. You're an embarrassment. Your Honor. I said, I am not asking you to excuse him. I am asking you to entrust him to me. The prosecutor scoffed. Give me 1 summer, I pleaded. That's all I ask. He's 15. Don't send him to juvenile hall. He'll come out a hardened criminal. Let me have him. 1 summer. If he messes up one time, if he skips curfew, if he so much as jaywalks, I will drive him back to this courtroom myself. The judge looked at me. He looked at Johnny, who was standing there in a borrowed suit that was too big for him. 1 summer, Mr. Carter, the judge said, banging his gavel. He's your responsibility. God help you. That summer was hell. Isabella treated me like I was a stranger. She and Emily left for a 2-month vacation to her sisters in Miami, leaving me alone with Johnny. The first week he was sullen silent. He locked himself in the basement. I made a new deal. You're not a guest here, I told him. You're going to work. Mornings I had him doing physical labor, cleaning the garage, stacking all my books in the basement, painting the fence. Afternoons he had to read. What is this crap? He sneered, holding the book I gave him. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's a book. You read it. Then you write me a 2-page report. Or what, you'll send me back to juvie. No, I said. If you don't read, you don't eat. He didn't eat for a day. The next afternoon, I found him on the basement sofa reading. We fought constantly. He'd throw the books. "This is stupid. This Roman emperor has nothing to do with me. He has everything to do with you," I'd yell back. He was a man who ruled the world, and he was terrified. He was angry, but he learned to rule himself first. I gave him Lincoln. I gave him Frederick Douglass, and then one day, in late July, the breakthrough. He came upstairs. He had a book in his hand. This guy Lincoln, he was a mess. He was depressed. He failed at everything. But he kept going. "That's right," I said. "He was a warrior." Johnny said, a strange new light in his eyes. "Yes, he was." I sat down. "You have a brilliant mind, Jonathan," I told him, looking him dead in the eye. "It's like a razor. It's sharper than mine. It's sharper than anyone's I've ever taught. But you're using it to cut yourself. You're using it to be a common criminal. Don't waste that mind. Don't be a thug. Be a warrior. Use that mind as your weapon." He didn't say anything. He just nodded. The rest of the summer, we didn't just read. We argued. We debated. He tore my historical arguments apart. He came alive. When Isabella and Emily came home at the end of August, they found a different kid. He was still quiet, but his anger was gone. It had been forged into something else. Focus. He finished high school at the top of his class. He got a full scholarship to the University of Michigan. Then Yale Law. I went to his high school graduation. Isabella refused to come. He walked across the stage, the valedictorian. He walked right over to me, his diploma in his hand, wearing that cap and gown I never thought he'd see. He shook my hand. His grip was firm. He wasn't a scared kid anymore. He was a man. "I won't let you down, Mr. Carter," he said. And he never did. I looked down at the old faded yearbook in my hands. Johnny Rook, most likely to sue the world. I smiled. My hands were no longer shaking. I had a lawyer. I snapped the yearbook shut. The dust motes settled in the dim light. My heart was pounding. It was insane. A desperate, foolish idea. Johnny Rook. He was a different person now. A high-powered attorney who probably lit cigars with $100 bills. He wouldn't remember me. Or worse, he'd remember me as the naive teacher his wife Isabella had always called a fool. But what else did I have? I pulled out my old smartphone, the one with the cracked screen. My fingers thick and clumsy from age, typed JONATHANROOKCHICAGOLA Dusseltu. The search results flooded the screen. It wasn't hard to find. It was the first result. Rook Law Group. The name was aggressive, just like he was. The website loaded. It was sleek, black, and silver. It featured a photo of a man I barely recognized, yet knew instantly. The defiant eyes were the same, but now they were set in the face of a man in a perfectly tailored $10,000 suit. His hair was slicked back. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a predator. The website tagline read, "We don't fight fair. We fight to win." My hand trembled as I clicked the contact button. A phone number for the downtown office. I stared at it. What was I even going to say? "Hello, remember me? I taught you history 30 years ago. Now my wife is trying to destroy me." He'd hang up. Isabella's voice echoed in my head. "You're an embarrassment, Ben." I took a deep breath. I thought of the ashes in the kitchen trash can. I thought of the $15,000. I pressed the number. The phone didn't even ring. It was answered instantly. "Rook Law Group. How may I direct your call?" The voice was crisp, professional, and ice-cold. It sounded less like a person and more like a high-end security system. "Yes, hello," I stammered, my voice cracking. I I need to speak to Mr. Jonathan Rook, please. Is Mr. Rook expecting your call? No. No, I'm afraid he's not. But Mr. Rook is in a meeting. She cut me off, her voice sharp. He does not accept unscheduled calls. If you'd like to schedule a consultation, his retainer fee is $50,000 and he is booking for next April. $50,000. My heart sank. That was everything Isabella said was left. The woman was right. I couldn't even afford to ask for help. Please, I begged. The desperation was thick in my voice. Please, it's a personal matter. A very urgent one. My name is… Sir, as I said, Mr. Rook is unavailable. If you cannot state your business or your referring party, I will have to disconnect. She was about to hang up. I was about to lose my only chance. I panicked. I had one shot, one memory. The books, the debates. Wait! I shouted, my voice cracking. Please don't hang up. She paused. I could hear the impatient click-clack of her keyboard in the silence. Yes, please, I said, my voice low and urgent. Just give him a message. Sir, I'm not his… Just give him the message, I insisted. Tell him this is Teacher Carter. Tell him it's Mr. Ben Carter from Lincoln High School. There was a brief silence. Mr. Carter, I'm not sure he'll… Tell him… I interrupted, the old authority of the classroom returning to my voice. Tell him it's about the Battle of Gettysburg. The keyboard tapping stopped. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It stretched for 10 seconds. 20. I thought she had hung up on me. I was about to pull the phone away from my ear, the last bit of hope draining away. And then I heard a sound. A sharp click. A new voice. It wasn't the defiant teenager. It wasn't the smooth corporate lawyer from the website. It was deep. It was powerful. It commanded the very air it moved through. Teacher Carter. The word teacher hit me with the force of a physical blow. No one had called me that in years. The relief was so sudden, so total that my legs gave out. I sank onto the cold basement floor, leaning against a shelf of my useless books. The tears I had been holding back since Isabella threw those papers on the table finally came. I wasn't just crying, I was sobbing. A 70-year-old man weeping like a child. Jonathan! I choked out the name. Johnny, is that you? Yes, sir, it's me. His voice was urgent, the professional edge gone, replaced by something I recognized. That old sharp focus. Mr. Carter, are you okay? Are you hurt? I'm in trouble, Jonathan. I wept. I'm in big trouble. My wife, my family, Stop, he commanded. The voice was sharp as steel. Don't say another word. Where are you? Are you at the house in Lincoln Park? Yes, in the basement. Good. Stay there. Lock the door if you can. I'm sending someone to you, right now. A black SUV will be at your house in 15 minutes. Her name is Diaz. Do not talk to your wife. Do not talk to your daughter. Do not under any circumstances sign anything. Do you understand me, Mr. Carter? Yes, I understand. Good, he said. And for a second, I heard the 15-year-old kid in his voice. Class is in session, teacher. We're going to teach them about history. We're going to teach them about consequences. I did exactly what Jonathan said. I left my house through the back door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I walked the 2 blocks to the Daily Grind, a small anonymous coffee shop I had never been into. Every shadow seemed to be watching me. Every passing car felt like a threat. I felt like a spy in one of my own history books, a very old, very scared spy. I sat in a booth by the window, my back to the wall, just as I'd seen in movies. I ordered a black coffee I didn't want. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to use both of them to lift the cup. At exactly 3:15, just as Jonathan had promised, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. It wasn't just a car. It was a statement. It was the kind of vehicle that glides through traffic, imposing and silent. The windows were so dark they looked like polished obsidian. The back door opened. A woman stepped out. She was not what I expected. She was young, maybe 40, dressed in a sharp, dark pantsuit. She moved with an economy of motion, a crisp confidence that was almost startling. She scanned the coffee shop window. Her eyes met mine, and she nodded once. She knew exactly who I was. She walked in. The little bell on the door jingled softly. She slid into the booth opposite me. She didn't smile. She didn't offer a handshake. She just placed a thin, expensive-looking leather briefcase on the table. "Mr. Carter?" she asked. Her voice was low, steady, and left no room for small talk. "Yes, Ben Carter. I'm Ms. Diaz. I work with Mr. Rook." She didn't say she was a lawyer. She said she worked with him. I understood immediately. She wasn't here to argue the law. She was here to find facts. She was an investigator. "Mr. Rook is in deposition in New York," she said, opening the briefcase. "But he wanted me to handle this personally. He said to tell you that class is in session." I felt a small, strange smile touch my lips. "Gettysburg," I whispered. "Precisely," she said, her expression unchanged. "He asked you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Do not leave anything out." And so I did. The words tumbled out of me. The dam of my fear and humiliation finally broke. I told her about Isabella's sudden demand for a divorce. I told her about the lie, the $1 million that had vanished, leaving only $50,000. I told her about Emily, my daughter, and my son-in-law, Patrick. He's an accountant. I stressed, my voice cracking on the word. He confirmed her story. He said the investments failed. He said she was being generous. Ms. Diaz's expression didn't change, but I saw her write Patrick Hayes, accountant, on a legal pad. Her handwriting was sharp and precise. "And then," I said, my voice dropping, "I found this." I pulled out my old cracked smartphone. I opened the photo gallery. I showed her the picture I had taken in the basement. The picture of the shredded, coffee-stained scraps of paper pieced together on my desk. "I'm sorry, it's a mess. I had to dig it out of the kitchen trash." She tore it up, in front of me. For the first time, her eyes flickered. She didn't look disgusted. She leaned in, zooming in on the image with her fingers. "Cayman National Trust," she read softly. "IC Enterprises. And $1.4 million. She burned it. I said, the shame burning in my own cheeks. She said it was worthless, a failed investment. But she panicked. She snatched it from my hand and threw it in the fireplace. Ms. Diaz looked up from the phone, her eyes finally showing a flicker of something. It wasn't sympathy. It was appreciation. "You did well, Mr. Carter," she said. "You did very well. This photo, this is the match." She pulled a thick, folded document from her briefcase and a heavy, expensive-looking pen. "This," she said, "is a full authorization and retainer agreement. It permits the Rook Law Group and by extension my forensic accounting team to act on your behalf." She turned the document and pushed it toward me. "It allows us to access every joint account you hold. It allows us to subpoena records from your wife's businesses, including her private ones. It allows us to track those failed investments. It allows us to find out exactly where the money went, who IC Enterprises belongs to, and who this Mr. Shaw, her lawyer, really is." She paused, her gaze intense. Mr. Rook was very clear on this, Teacher Carter. He had told her to call me teacher. The word hit me with a jolt of strength. He said all resources of the firm are at your disposal. Mr. Rook is covering all costs until a settlement is reached. His exact words were, "His credit is good here." I looked at the signature line. My hand was shaking again, but for a different reason. This was real. I wasn't alone. This authorization, Mr. Carter, she continued, it will allow us to find out exactly what Patrick Hayes reviewed. It will allow us to see if your daughter Emily received any gifts recently. It allows us to find out if Isabella Carter is incompetent or if she is a criminal. I picked up the heavy pen. It felt balanced, weighted. It felt like a weapon. She is not incompetent, I said, my voice low and hard. We agree, Ms. Diaz replied. I signed my name, Benjamin Carter. It wasn't the shaky scrawl of a victim. It was the firm, clear signature of a teacher grading a final failing exam. I pushed the paper back. Ms. Diaz stood up, placing the signed document carefully back into her briefcase. What now? I asked. Now, she said, zipping the case shut. You go home. You are a sad, defeated old man. You are overwhelmed. You are considering signing her papers. You are looking for a cheap apartment. You are exactly who she thinks you are. She looked me dead in the eye. You do nothing. You say nothing. You let us work. We will be in touch when we have the ammunition. She nodded once, then turned and walked out of the coffee shop. I watched the black SUV glide away into Chicago traffic. I was still a retired teacher in a cheap cafe, my hands smelling of garbage. But I was no longer a fool. I had Jonathan Rook. I had an army. I walked back into the house. My house. The smell of garlic and expensive olive oil filled the air. Isabella was cooking. She only cooked when she was either trying to close a big deal or celebrating one. I figured this was a celebration. She was celebrating my execution. I walked into the kitchen. She glanced up from a pan of sizzling shrimp. Oh, you're back, she said, her voice neutral. I was wondering where you went. I thought maybe you'd already started packing. I just needed a walk, I said, shuffling my feet, playing the part Ms. Diaz had assigned me, the defeated old man. Just thinking. Well, don't think too hard, she said, tossing the shrimp. It's a simple decision, Ben. Sign the papers. Take the $15,000. It's more than you'd get if we actually went to court and showed a judge our finances. The lie was so easy for her now. It just rolled off her tongue while she sautéed shrimp. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was Emily. My heart, despite everything, gave a stupid little jump of hope. Maybe she was calling to apologize. I answered. Hello, Em. Dad. Where have you been? I've been calling. Her voice was sharp, annoyed. I was out for a walk. Dad, you need to sign the papers, she said. No preamble, no how are you. Just the demand. You're dragging this out. It's upsetting Mom. It's upsetting me. Patrick says you're just making things harder on yourself. Honey, it's a big step. 40 years. Dad, stop, she snapped. Stop being so dramatic. Mom told us. She lost the money. It's a tragedy. We all lost. But you're the only one acting like a child. You're not the only one who's suffering. Patrick and I are suffering too, seeing the family like this. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I wanted to scream into the phone, You're suffering. How much are you suffering with my $300,000 in your bank account? But I held my tongue. I let out a long, shaky sigh. The kind of sigh a defeated man makes. I just don't know where I'm going to go, Emily. I whispered, making my voice tremble. Everything is so expensive. The apartments. On my pension. Then figure it out, she said, her patience gone. Go to a senior living center. I don't know, just sign the papers, Dad. Stop making this our problem. Patrick is already helping Mom enough. He doesn't need this extra stress. We're busy. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. I stood there in the kitchen, the phone in my hand. My own daughter. Isabella looked over, a small, knowing smirk on her face. She had heard. See, even Emily knows. It's time to be an adult, Ben. Accept reality. I nodded, playing my part. I let my shoulders slump. You're right, I whispered. You're all right. It's just hard. I know it's hard, she said, her voice softening now that she had won. But it's for the best. Now be a good man and sign. Let's get this over with. I will, I said. I promise, I need a few more days. I think I found a small apartment in Rogers Park. I just need to see it. I'll sign by the end of the week. I promise. Isabella studied my face. She was looking for any sign of resistance. I gave her none. I just looked at her with the beaten, empty eyes of a man who had lost everything. Finally, she nodded. Fine. A few more days, Ben. But that's it. I'm not waiting forever. I nodded. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you. I turned and shuffled back down to my basement, the meek, defeated old fool. The moment I closed the door, I locked it. I sat down at my desk, my body vibrating with a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. Rogers Park. Senior living. Figure it out. My laptop was open. I opened my encrypted email account, the one Ms. Diaz had set up for me. There was a new message. It had arrived just 5 minutes ago. The subject line was simple, Update 1. I opened it. The message was brief. No pleasantries. Just facts. Mr. Carter, we have initial results. You were correct to be suspicious. The failed investment story is a fabrication. Patrick Hayes did oversee a series of transfers from your joint accounts. These were coded as market losses. They were not losses. They were direct wire transfers. The funds were not lost. They were moved. We have located the primary receiving account, IC Enterprises, at Cayman National Trust. The account is active. Isabella Carter did not lie about losing the money. She lied about where it went. We are continuing to trace the outbound transfers from IC Enterprises. Stand by. Diaz. I closed the laptop. I looked around my basement, my prison, my sanctuary. Isabella was upstairs enjoying her shrimp, believing she had won. Believing I was a broken old man searching for a cheap room in Rogers Park. She had no idea. I wasn't a fool. I was a historian, and I was just gathering my evidence. I had to wait 2 days, 2 agonizing days. I played the part of the broken man. I shuffled around the house in my old slippers. I made a show of looking at apartment listings on my phone whenever Isabella was in the room, sighing heavily, rubbing my temples. She watched me. I could feel her eyes on me when I was in the kitchen, measuring my every move. She thought I was a beaten dog. She thought I was accepting my fate. She seemed to relax. The predator, having secured its kill, was no longer on high alert. On Thursday morning, I told her I was going to the Walgreens to refill my blood pressure medication. Fine, she said, not even looking up from the stock market ticker on her iPad. Don't be long. We have to call the realtor about listing the house. I just nodded meekly and shuffled out the front door. I didn't go to the pharmacy. I walked 4 blocks in the opposite direction, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Every passing car made me jump. I felt like a fugitive. I was a 70-year-old man sneaking around my own neighborhood. I went to the Harold Washington Library. It was neutral. It was public. It was anonymous. Ms. Diaz had said to meet in the history section on the 3rd floor. I found her sitting at a long, empty oak table. She looked like a graduate student, a laptop open in front of her, a stack of books on European history beside her. She didn't look up when I sat down, she just patted the seat next to me. The library was quiet. The only sound was the distant hum of the ventilation and the soft rustle of someone turning a newspaper. "Did you find anything?" I whispered. Ms. Diaz didn't whisper. Her voice was low, clear, and cut through the silence like a scalpel. "We found everything, Teacher Carter." She turned her laptop screen toward me. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't a victory, not yet. This was an autopsy. "First," she said, "your wife is a sloppy, arrogant liar. Destroying that one piece of paper was the act of an amateur. She forgot that in the digital age everything leaves a trail." She clicked a key. "You were correct to be suspicious of IC Enterprises. We ran the name. It's a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. As you suspected, Isabella Carter is the sole signatory." She paused, then added a new devastating piece of information. "And your son-in-law, Patrick Hayes, is listed as the acting accountant on the incorporation documents." My breath caught. The accountant. Not just her friend. Not just her advisor. On the documents. "The account isn't frozen or worthless." Ms. Diaz continued, her voice flat. "It is very, very active." She opened a file. It was a spreadsheet. The numbers were sharp, clean, and undeniable. "This is the statement from 3 years ago that you photographed from the scraps," she said, pointing to a line item. The balance was $1.4 million. She clicked again. A new, more recent document filled the screen. "This is the balance as of this morning, after 3 more years of her failed investments." I leaned in. I had to put on my reading glasses. "Mr. Carter," she said, "the current balance in that account is $1,842,000 and change. 1.8 million. I stared at the number. I couldn't process it. But our joint account," I stammered. She said it was gone. Patrick said it was gone, only 50,000 left. "She was half right," Ms. Diaz said. "The money is gone from your joint account, but it wasn't lost in the market." She pulled up a second window. It was a copy of my joint checking account statement from Chase. My own account. I saw a long list of withdrawals going back 5 years. Red negative numbers. minus 50,000. minus 100,000. minus 75,000. Over and over. "I thought," she said, "that was the market crashing." I whispered, my voice trembling in the quiet library. "No, Mr. Carter." Ms. Diaz zoomed in on one of the transaction codes. It was a string of numbers I didn't recognize. "These weren't losses," she said. "They were wire transfers. Your son-in-law, Mr. Hayes, personally authorized every single one of them from his home computer." I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the edge of the oak table to keep from falling. "He coded them in your account ledger as market volatility readjustment or capital loss write-off. It's accounting jargon, Mr. Carter. It's sophisticated language to hide a very simple, very brutal theft." She turned to look at me, her eyes cold and clear. "Your son-in-law wasn't covering for your wife. He was her partner. He was the one who knew how to make $1 million disappear without tripping a single alarm at the bank. He systematically drained your life savings month by month and moved it to her offshore account, all while pretending to be your helpful son-in-law." I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen. Patrick. The quiet, polite man who sat at my Thanksgiving table. The man who ate my wife's, no, the turkey I always roasted. The man I had given $50,000 to from my own mother's inheritance to save his house. He hadn't just confirmed the lie. He was the lie. He was the architect of my destruction. He called her generous," I whispered. The memory of that phone call, of his condescending clinical voice, made me physically sick. "He said she was generous for leaving me $15,000. He would," Ms. Diaz said, closing his laptop. "He was protecting his investment and his co-conspirator." She looked at me, her face unreadable. "This is just the first layer, Mr. Carter. This is the money going in. Now, we find out where the money went out." I felt sick, physically ill. I leaned my head forward, resting my forehead on the cool, polished wood of the library table. The smell of old books and lemon wax filled my lungs, but I felt like I couldn't breathe. Patrick, my son-in-law, the quiet, polite man who always brought a good bottle of wine to Thanksgiving. The man I had saved from financial ruin when he lost his job. He wasn't just covering for her. He wasn't just a witness. He was the architect. He was the one who built the cage I was in. He used his accounting skills not to protect me, but to fleece me. I heard a soft click of a mouse. "Mr. Carter." Ms. Diaz's voice was quiet, but it cut through my nausea like a scalpel. "I need you to focus. That was just the money going in. We need to talk about the money going out." I lifted my head. My hands were shaking again so badly, I hid them in my lap. "Out," I whispered. "What do you mean? I thought she was just hiding it. For her retirement." "She is," Ms. Diaz said. "But she's also spending it, lavishly. This isn't just a retirement fund, Mr. Carter. This is a personal slush fund. A slush fund she built with your money." She turned the laptop screen back toward me. The spreadsheet was still there, but she had clicked on a new tab. This one was labeled Outbound Transfers. "We've only tracked the last 2 years," she explained, her voice flat and professional. "We're seeing dozens of payments. Credit cards, American Express Black, Neiman Marcus, luxury car leases in her business name. But those are relatively small. This one," she scrolled down her finger, moving precisely on the trackpad. She highlighted a single line item. "This is the one Mr. Rook wanted you to see." I leaned in, squinting. I had to put on my reading glasses. The date was June 14th, 2 years ago. The transaction was a wire transfer. The amount, my breath caught. $300,000. A single transfer. $300,000. Who did she pay?" I stammered. Was it her lawyer, Mr. Shaw?" "No," Ms. Diaz said. "The receiving entity was a domestic LLC, P&E Consulting." I frowned. P&E? I'd never heard of it. P&E. "What is that, another shell company?" Ms. Diaz didn't answer. She just clicked again, opening another document. It was a scanned image, a state of Illinois business registration filing. "P&E Consulting LLC," she said, reading from the screen. "Date of incorporation June 1st to 2 years ago, exactly 2 weeks before the transfer." She moved her mouse, highlighting the names of the registered agents on the filing. My vision swam. I gripped the edge of the oak table to keep from falling. The registered agents were Patrick Hayes and Emily Hayes, my daughter, my Emily, P. and E. Patrick, and Emily. I think I made a sound, a low, wounded animal noise. Ms. Diaz politely pretended not to hear it. P&E Consulting, my daughter, my little girl. The phone call from 2 days ago flashed in my mind. Her sharp, annoyed voice. "Stop making this our problem, Dad. We're busy." She was busy. She was busy cashing my checks. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening snap. The $300,000 transfer. The timing. It was right when they bought their new beautiful brick house in Evanston. The house I thought was a little too expensive for them on a single accountant's salary. The house they said they got a miracle loan for. It wasn't a miracle loan. It was a payoff. It was my money. I felt the bitter taste of cheap coffee rise in my throat. I remembered. God, I remembered. I remembered giving them $50,000 from my mother's inheritance to save their old condo. A gift. I had given them a gift with love. And this was how they repaid me. They hadn't just accepted my gift. They had come back behind my back and stolen 6 times that amount. They stole my life savings to buy their dream house, all while knowing that their mother, their partner in crime, was planning to throw me on the street with nothing. They weren't just accomplices. They weren't just standing by. They were beneficiaries. They were paid for their silence. The girl I taught to ride a bike. The daughter whose tears I had dried after her first broken heart. She had sold me. She had sold her father for a 2-car garage and a nice yard in Evanston. "Mr. Carter." Ms. Diaz's voice was soft but distant. I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen. Patrick and Emily. P&E. Isabella hadn't just stolen my wife. She had stolen my daughter, too. I sat there in the quiet of the history section, the world tilting under my feet. My daughter. My Emily. The $300,000 wasn't a loan. It wasn't a gift from a successful mother. It was a payoff. It was my money. Stolen from me, laundered by my son-in-law, and given to my daughter to buy her silence, to buy her loyalty. I felt a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. Bile. I had been sold. I looked up at Ms. Diaz. Her face was impassive. She was just a messenger delivering the autopsy report of my life. "Is that—" I swallowed, my throat dry and thick. "Is that all of it?" Ms. Diaz looked at her notes. Her professionalism was almost cruel. It offered no comfort. "No, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice flat. "That was the family layer. Now we have the business layer." I didn't understand. "I thought that was the business." "That was the theft," she corrected me. "This is the motive. Mr. Rook asked us to cross-reference her travel itineraries for the past 5 years, the ones she filed with her company for tax purposes." I remembered all those trips. The networking conferences in Miami, the real estate expos in Scottsdale, the client meetings in New York. I had been proud of her. My wife, the successful businesswoman. I had packed her bags. I had watered her plants. I had sat at home, a quiet, supportive husband, grading papers while she flew around the country, building her empire. The trips were a cover, Ms. Diaz continued, as if reading my mind. She traveled, Mr. Carter, but not always to the cities she claimed, and rarely alone. My blood went cold. What? What are you saying? She frequently traveled with one individual, a Mr. Gregory Shaw. The name hit me. Shaw, that's her lawyer, the one handling the divorce. "He's more than her lawyer, Mr. Carter," Ms. Diaz said, clicking her mouse. "We ran his financials as well. They have been closely associated for over 3 years. 3 years, I thought back. 3 years. That was right around the time I'd found that first bank statement, the one she burned. "Our guess," Ms. Diaz said, her voice clinical. "You finding that statement spooked her. She knew the lie was too big to handle alone. She needed an ally. She found one in Mr. Shaw." An affair. The word hung in the silent library air. I hadn't even considered it. I was so focused on the money, on the betrayal of my children. I hadn't even thought. After 40 years, the woman I slept next to every night. I felt numb. I wasn't even angry. I was just hollow. "But it's not just an affair, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice pulling me back from the void. "It's a conspiracy. The money from IC Enterprises wasn't just for her retirement. It was funding their new life." She turned the laptop screen toward me. It wasn't a spreadsheet this time. It was a photograph, a beautiful, sprawling white villa perched on a cliff overlooking a turquoise ocean. An infinity pool sparkled in the sun. It looked like a postcard from paradise. "What is this?" I whispered. "A resort. It's a private villa in Costa Rica." We traced a wire transfer from IC Enterprises 4 months ago. $500,000. It was the final payment on this property. She clicked again. A new document. Another incorporation filing. It was purchased by a holding company registered in Panama, she said. The holding company is named G&B Properties. I frowned. G&B Gregory and Isabella. Ms. Diaz finished answering the question I was too afraid to ask. We believe she used your initial B for Ben as a final insult. A smokescreen in case anyone ever looked. I just stared at the picture of that white house. A love nest. Built with my money. My father's inheritance. My 40 years of teaching. My $60,000 I gave to my daughter. All of it. Siphoned away. By my wife. By my son-in-law. By my daughter. By her lover. My mind, the teacher's mind, started doing the math. Adding it all up on the blackboard of my brain. $1.8 million hidden in the Cayman Islands. $300,000 paid to my daughter and son-in-law to buy their silence. $500,000 spent on a secret villa in Costa Rica with her lover. I did the sum. $2.6 million. $2.6 million, I whispered out loud. And she was leaving me with $15,000. She was leaving me $200 a month. I looked at Ms. Diaz. The numbness was gone. The shock was gone. The hollow feeling was gone. It was filled from the soles of my feet to the roots of my hair with a cold, clear, righteous anger. This wasn't a divorce. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a theft. This was an extermination. They weren't just trying to leave me. They were trying to erase me. I stared at the screen at the picture of the white villa in Costa Rica. $2.6 million. My daughter. My wife. My son-in-law. My wife's lover. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had formed an alliance, a pack of wolves to pick me clean. I felt hollowed out, erased. I felt sick. I finally looked up from the laptop. I must have looked like a ghost. I tried to speak, but only a dry, rasping sound came out. Is that... I swallowed my throat thick and dry. Is that... finally all of it? Ms. Diaz closed the file on the Costa Rica property. She looked at me not with pity, but with a cold, professional gravity that chilled me to the bone. That is the summary of the financial theft, Mr. Carter, she said. That was Plan A. The words hung in the quiet library air. Plan A. The phrase made no sense. What do you mean, Plan A? She leaned forward. Her voice was low. Stealing your money, leaving you with nothing, and forcing you to sign the divorce papers. That was Plan A. But they had a contingency. A Plan B, in case you didn't cooperate. In case you didn't just sign the papers and disappear like a good, quiet old man. What are you talking about? Mr. Rook has extensive resources, Teacher Carter, she said. He didn't just ask us to look at the money. He asked us to look at them. Your son-in-law, Patrick Hayes. It turns out he's not just creative with your accounting. He's been skimming from his own firm for the last 18 months. I was stunned. He's stealing from his job, too. Yes. And because his partners are pressing charges, we were able to legally obtain a warrant to monitor his office communications. He is under a separate active investigation. We just got to listen in. She didn't open her laptop. She took a small black digital audio recorder from her briefcase and placed it on the oak table between us. This was recorded 3 days ago, she said. From his office, a speakerphone call with your wife. After you had your confrontation about the Cayman account. You need to hear this. She pressed play. The library was silent, but the recording was perfectly clear. First I heard Patrick's voice, tight and angry. He's not signing Isabella. I'm telling you, he's asking questions. He asked about the investments. He's sniffing around. The failed investment story isn't holding him. Then Isabella's voice sharp with annoyance. He's a fool, Patrick. He'll sign. He's just being stubborn. He's probably trying to find some bargain bin lawyer who'll work for free. And what if he does? Patrick shot back. What if someone, even a stupid one, starts digging? We can't risk that. The trail is too clean right now, but it's still a trail. It's time. We have to move on plan B, the guardianship. My blood turned to ice. Guardianship. There was a pause on the recording. Then Isabella's voice, hesitant. Isn't that extreme, declaring him incompetent? And then I heard my son-in-law laugh. A short, cold, clinical laugh. It's clean, Patrick said. It's permanent. He's 70 years old. He's forgetful. He's confused. It's my word as his concerned son-in-law and financial expert against his. We'll start documenting. I'll change the password on his online banking again and tell him he forgot it. We'll schedule doctor's appointments and tell him the wrong dates. When he misses them, it's confusion. When he can't pay his bills, it's incapacity. We'll get a friendly doctor to do an evaluation. We'll suggest he has early onset Alzheimer's. In 2 months, with my testimony, we can have a judge declare him incompetent. There was another silence. Then Isabella's voice, barely a whisper. And then, Patrick's voice was the killing blow. And then we control everything. You, as his devoted wife, become his legal guardian. You sign the divorce papers for him. You control his pension. You control him. He loses his civil rights. He can't hire a lawyer. He can't testify. He can't even leave the house without your permission. It's the perfect solution. He becomes a non-person. And the problem just goes away. Ms. Diaz pressed stop. The recording ended. The heavy academic silence of the library rushed back in, but I couldn't hear it. All I could hear was that phrase, a non-person. They weren't just trying to rob me. That was plan A. Plan B was to bury me alive, to lock me in a room confused and drugged, to take my name, to take my mind, to tell the world I was crazy, senile, incompetent, to turn me into a ghost while I was still breathing. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't about an affair or a villa in Costa Rica. This was about my personhood, my very existence. They weren't just stealing my past. They were actively plotting to steal my future, my present, and my very identity. I looked up at Ms. Diaz. The numbness was gone. The shock was gone. The hollow feeling was gone. It was filled from the soles of my feet to the roots of my hair, with a rage so cold and so pure it felt like a religious conversion. Ms. Diaz looked at me, her face still, but her eyes sharp. Mr. Rook wanted you to hear that, she said, her voice low, because he wants you to understand what kind of war this is. This is not a divorce proceeding, Mr. Carter. This is an extermination. And they are the enemy. I looked down at my own hands. 70-year-old hands, spotted-veined, but they were steady. They were not the hands of an incompetent old man. They were the hands of a man who was now finally ready to fight. I walked out of the library. The bright Chicago sun hit my face, but I couldn't feel its warmth. I was frozen. I felt like I was walking through water. A non-person. The words echoed in my head, louder than the traffic on State Street, louder than the sirens in the distance. They weren't just going to rob me. They were going to erase me, my wife, my daughter, my son-in-law. They had sat at my dinner table, they had eaten my food, they had accepted my gifts, all while casually plotting to have me declared legally insane, to lock me away, to sign my rights over to them, to turn me into a ghost while I was still breathing, all so they could drain my bank accounts without any trouble. This wasn't a divorce anymore. This wasn't just theft. This was a kind of murder. The murder of a man's mind, of his identity. I found a bench in a small concrete park. I sat down heavily. My hands were shaking. But it wasn't the weak, frightened tremor I'd felt before. This was a vibration. It was a 70-year-old engine of pure, unadulterated rage starting to turn over. They thought I was a clueless old man. They thought I was forgetful, and they thought I was confused. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady. I didn't call the main office. Miss Diaz had given me a private number, one that bypassed the secretaries, the retainers, and the waiting lists. It rang once. "Speak." Jonathan's voice. No hello, just that single sharp command. "Jonathan," I said. My own voice sounded strange to me. It was raspy, low, and cold. "It's Ben Carter." "Teacher." I heard the change in his voice. The sharpness softened for a fraction of a second. "Diaz just sent me the audio file. I heard it. Are you safe?" "I'm at a park," I said, staring at a pigeon pecking at the concrete. "I'm safe." "Good." A pause. "You sound angry." "Good. You should be." They're planning to declare me incompetent," I said. The words tasted like poison. "They're going to say I have Alzheimer's. They're going to make me a non-person. Just to get the money." I waited for him to say something, to offer sympathy, to say it was horrible. He didn't. There was just a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing slow and measured. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. It wasn't the voice of my former student. It wasn't even the voice of a lawyer. It was the voice of a general assessing a battlefield. "Teacher Carter," he said, his voice flat and cold as steel. "Do you remember the lesson you taught me on the Battle of Gettysburg?" The question was so bizarre, so out of place, that it snapped me out of my rage. "What Gettysburg, Jonathan, this is?" "Do you remember?" he insisted. Yes, of course. I taught it for 40 years. You taught me that General Meade won not just because he had the high ground, but because he stopped defending. You told me that for 2 days he just reacted. He just took the hits. But on the third day, he countered. He stopped trying to survive the attack, and he began his own. He stopped playing their game and started his own. I was silent. I knew exactly what he was saying. "They've escalated, teacher," he continued, his voice hardening. "They just moved their pieces. This isn't a simple divorce anymore. This isn't a financial dispute. They just declared war. Not on your money, on you, on your mind, on your freedom." I gripped the phone. What do we do?" "We stop defending," Jonathan said. "We stop playing their game. We stop reacting to their moves. We launch our own attack. We set the terms. We choose the battlefield." They want to go to court," I whispered, "to have me declared incompetent." "Good," Rook said. The word was a sharp crack. "Let them. They want to go to court. We'll go to court. We'll give them the battle they're asking for. But it won't be in some quiet, closed-door guardianship hearing where they can whisper their lies to a sympathetic judge. Then what? We'll do it in open court. We'll do it on our terms. They think you're a confused old man with no money. Fine. Let them believe that. Let them walk into that courtroom fat, arrogant, and overconfident." I could almost hear him smile. A cold, sharp smile. "They've forgotten who you are, teacher. They've forgotten that you're the man who taught me. They've forgotten that you don't just teach history. You use it. Now here is what you are going to do. You are going to go home. You are going to be the most defeated, pathetic, scared old man they have ever seen. And you are going to give them exactly what they want." I walked back home, every step feeling heavy, deliberate. I was no longer the sad old man. I was a soldier. I was walking into enemy territory, and I had my orders. Play the part. I opened the front door. The house was quiet. Isabella was in the kitchen on the phone. I could hear her sharp, professional voice. "No, a 60-day close is too long," she was saying. "We need 30. My client is motivated." She hung up and saw me standing in the doorway. I had put on my defeated face. My shoulders were slumped. My hands were shoved deep in my pockets. I looked like a man who had walked to the edge of the world and found nothing there. She sighed, annoyed. "What is it now, Ben? You look like your dog just died." I've been thinking," I said, my voice just a low mumble. I shuffled to a kitchen chair and sat down heavily. You're right." She stopped what she was doing. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing, suspicious. "What did you say?" "You're right," I repeated. "All of you, Emily, Patrick, you." I looked up at her, and I let her see the fake, broken emptiness in my eyes. I'm tired. I'm 70 years old. I can't fight this. I don't even know how to fight this. I'm just a teacher. I don't understand any of this." I watched her face. The suspicion faded. It was replaced by something else. Triumphant, barely concealed satisfaction. She had won. "I'll sign the papers," I said. A slow smile spread across her face. She walked over and, to my utter shock, patted my shoulder. A cold, condescending pat. "Ben, you're finally being smart," she said, her voice full of that false, syrupy kindness. "It's for the best. Really, it'll be a clean break." Patrick and Emily, who had apparently been summoned, walked in from the living room. They must have been waiting for this moment. "Did you tell him?" Emily asked her mother. "He's just agreed," Isabella said, smiling at them. "Your father is going to sign." Emily and Patrick visibly relaxed. It was like a string had been cut. Patrick's shoulders, which had been tense, dropped. Emily let out a little sigh of relief. "Oh, Dad," Emily said, coming over. That's so good. I'm so glad. This has been so hard on all of us." "Hard on you," I thought, my rage simmering beneath the mask of defeat. "You've been suffering with my $300,000. "That's great, Dad. Ben," Patrick said, chiming in. "A very wise decision. We'll help you find a nice, clean place. We'll get you settled." They were all smiling. My loving family. The pack of wolves, happy that the old stag had finally given up and laid down to die. "I'll sign," I said again, with my voice trembling. But I have one condition." The smiles froze. Isabella's eyes narrowed again. "A condition, Ben, we're not negotiating." "No," I said, raising my hand, playing the scared old man. "No, not like that. It's just, I've been thinking about what Patrick said." Patrick looked confused. "What? What did I say?" About me being confused," I said, looking at the floor. "About, my memory. You said I forgot the bank password, that I've been missing appointments." Patrick and Isabella exchanged a look. I saw it. It was the look of co-conspirators who had just heard their victim walk right into their trap. "Dad, we're just concerned," Emily started, her voice full of fake pity. "I know, honey. I know," I said. And that's why. I don't want to just sign here, in the kitchen." "What are you talking about?" Isabella said, her patience wearing thin. "I want to sign it in court," I said. Patrick frowned. "In court? Why, that's what we're trying to avoid. That's unnecessary." "No, you don't understand," I pleaded, putting every ounce of my acting ability into it. "It's because of what you said. I'm worried. What if I sign this, and then in a year or 2 years, Emily, you or Patrick, you say I wasn't in my right mind when I signed it? What if you sue your mother saying she took advantage of a confused old man?" I looked at Emily, my eyes wide with fake fear. I don't want to cause more trouble. I want it to be final. I want to sign it in front of a judge, so the judge can see me, so he can ask me the questions. So it's official on the record that I was of sound mind. I looked down. It's for your protection, Isabella, so this can never be challenged. There was a long silence. I watched Patrick. His accountant's mind was racing. I could see the gears turning. He was thinking. He's doing our work for us. He's going to walk into court and hand us the perfect opportunity to bring up his confusion in front of a judge. He and Isabella shared another longer look. This one was triumphant. Patrick nodded slowly. You know, Dad, Ben, that's actually very smart, very responsible. Isabella's cold smile returned. He's right, Ben. That's surprisingly thoughtful of you, protecting my interests. Then you'll do it, I asked, looking like a hopeful child. Of course, Isabella said, her voice magnanimous. I'll have Shaw file the motion for a hearing immediately. If you want to go in front of a judge and have your little moment, that's fine. She turned her victory complete. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have calls to make. We'll let you know the court date. She and Patrick and Emily walked out of the kitchen, their voices low, already scheming. I heard the pop of a champagne cork from the living room. They were celebrating. They thought I had just handed them the knife to slit my own throat. They didn't realize. I had just built the gallows, and they were the ones walking right up the steps. It was my last night in the house, my last night in the basement. I was on my knees, surrounded by 40 years of my life, packed into cardboard boxes. The smell of dust, old paper, and decay was thick in the air. Upstairs, I could hear them. Isabella, Emily, and Patrick. They were in the dining room. I could hear their laughter. It was light, happy, the sound of a family celebrating. They were toasting their victory. They were toasting the final brilliant move of the confused old man who had just agreed to walk into a courtroom and hand them his own execution. I pulled another stack of books from the shelf. My hands were raw, my back ached. My fingers brushed against a thin, faded blue envelope I had used as a bookmark. I pulled it out. Yale University. An acceptance letter. Dated 1975. A full scholarship for a PhD in history. I had been so proud. I was going to be Dr. Benjamin Carter. I was going to write books. I remembered showing it to Isabella. We were standing in our tiny first apartment. She had looked at it, then looked at me, her eyes wide, and she had said, Ben, I'm pregnant. Emily. I never went to Yale. I stayed. I got my teaching certificate at the local college. I chose her. I chose my daughter. I chose this. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I picked up another box, this one filled with old teacher's planners from the 1980s. I flipped one open. Every single day was filled with my cramped, neat handwriting. 4:00 p.m., 6:00 p.m. tutoring the Johnson kid. 7:00 p.m., 9:00 p.m. night school American civics. I remembered those years. I remembered the exhaustion. I'd teach a full day at Lincoln High, 8 hours on my feet, then grab a stale sandwich in my car. I'd drive across town to tutor wealthy kids for $50 an hour. Then I'd drive to the community college to teach night classes. I came home every night after 11. Isabella would be asleep. I'd fall into bed too tired to even take off my socks just to wake up at 5 a.m. and do it all over again. Why? Because Isabella wanted to start her real estate company. She needed seed money. She needed the mortgage paid while she built her brand. It's for us, Ben, she had promised. It's for our future, for Emily. So I did it. I worked 2 jobs. I funded her dream. I paid for the house she was now taking from me. Everything I ever did. It was for them. The sound of their laughter drifted down the stairs, again louder this time. A sharp, cruel sound. They were laughing at me, the fool in the basement. I stopped packing. I slowly got to my feet. My knees cracked. I felt every one of my 70 years. I walked over to the small, cheap mirror that hung on the concrete wall, the one I used to check my tie in the mornings. I looked at my reflection. I saw what they saw. A tired old man, gray thinning hair, deep lines around my eyes, a faded, worn-out flannel shirt. The uniform of a man who was finished, a man who was confused, a clueless old fool. I leaned closer, my face inches from the glass. A non-person. The word echoed in my head. I stared into my own eyes. They weren't confused. They weren't empty. They were angry. "No," I whispered to the man in the mirror. My voice was hoarse, but it was steady. "You are not a fool. You are not incompetent. You are not a ghost." I stood up straight, pulling my shoulders back. "You are Benjamin Carter. You are a teacher. You taught 10,000 students. You taught them about the fall of Rome. You taught them about the rise of the Republic. You taught them about justice." I thought of the men who had signed the Declaration of Independence, risking everything, their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. They weren't young men. Many of them were my age. "You," I said to my reflection, "are the man who saved Jonathan Rook. You took a broken, angry boy and you forged him into a warrior. You did that." The laughter from upstairs seemed to fade. It couldn't touch me anymore. I was not going to be erased. I was not going to be a non-person. They wanted a fight. They wanted to go to court. I had spent my entire life teaching the lessons of history. Betrayal, hubris, the fall of empires. I had given my last lesson to Jonathan Rook 30 years ago. Tomorrow, I was going to give my last lesson to my wife. My phone sitting on the dusty desk buzzed once. I picked it up. A new text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew exactly who it was. The message was 5 words. "Sleep well, teacher. Tomorrow class begins." I arrived at the Daily Center at 9 a.m. The courtroom was on the 17th floor, family law. I gripped the handle of my old, worn leather briefcase. It was the same one I had carried to Lincoln High every day for 30 years. It smelled faintly of chalk dust and old paper. I was wearing my court suit. It was my only suit. A 20-year-old dark brown wool suit, slightly shiny at the elbows. It was the suit I wore to graduations, to faculty meetings, and to funerals. It was my uniform of quiet, invisible dignity. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors to courtroom 1704, and there they were. They were already seated in the front row. They looked like they were attending a Broadway premiere, not a divorce hearing. Isabella was in a cream-colored silk suit that probably cost more than my entire monthly pension. Her hair was perfectly styled. She was smiling, leaning over to whisper something to her lawyer, Mr. Shaw. Next to her sat Emily, my daughter. She wore a black dress that looked expensive. She was looking at her phone, refusing to look up. And next to her was Patrick, my son-in-law, the accountant. He looked smug, confident, tapping his pen impatiently on a sleek leather folio. They were all laughing. Isabella, Patrick, and Mr. Shaw. They were laughing like they were at a cocktail party. They were laughing like they had already won. They were laughing at me. I walked slowly down the center aisle. My old polished shoes squeaked softly on the marble floor. Every step felt like I was walking through wet cement. Patrick saw me first. He nudged Isabella. The laughter stopped. They all turned to look. Isabella's face, which had been so bright and animated, hardened. She looked me up and down, from my slightly too short trousers to my old-fashioned tie. I saw the look in her eyes. It was not just pity. It was disgust. She whispered something to Mr. Shaw, and he chuckled, not even bothering to cover his mouth. I sat down on the hard wooden bench on the opposite side of the aisle. The respondent, alone. The courtroom was filling up. Lawyers in expensive suits, other broken families. Isabella stood up. She glided across the aisle, her heels clicking decisively on the floor. She smelled of expensive perfume, something sharp and floral that I didn't recognize. She stopped in front of my bench and looked down at me. "Ben," she said. Her voice was low, smooth, like honey mixed with poison. "It's not too late. You don't have to do this to yourself." I just looked at her. I couldn't find the woman I had married anywhere in her cold, beautiful face. "Look at you," she continued, her eyes flicking over my old suit. "You're out of your depth. You're embarrassing yourself, Ben. You don't belong here." I have a right to be here," I managed to say. My voice was a dry whisper. "A right to what?" she scoffed. "A right to be publicly humiliated. A right to have a judge tell you that you're broke. Ben, listen to me." She leaned in, her voice dropping. "My car is waiting downstairs. Sign the papers. Right now. Take the 15,000. We'll even call it 20,000. For your trouble. Just sign and go home. Go back to your basement. Don't make everyone in this room waste their time." This was her final act of generosity. An extra $5,000 to buy my silence. To make me disappear. I looked down at my own hands clasped together on the handle of my briefcase. They were spotted with age, but they were steady. I looked back up at her. At my wife of 40 years. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. It cut through the murmur of the courtroom. Her eyes narrowed. "What did you say, Sam?" I said, "No, Isabella, I'm not signing." "Don't be a fool," she hissed, her voice sharp with sudden anger. "Shaw is going to destroy you, and if you fight this, Ben, I promise you we will bring up your confusion. We will bring up your episodes." The threat. Plan B. The guardianship. She was threatening to have me declared insane right here, right now. I took a slow, steady breath. "I'm not worried," I said. I believe I have representation." Isabella stared at me for a long second. Then she laughed. It wasn't a small laugh. It was a loud, sharp, ugly burst of sound that made a clerk in the back of the room look up. "Representation?" she mocked, her voice dripping with scorn. "You! With what money, Ben? Who did you manage to find?" She looked me up and down again, a look of pure contempt. "Legal aid, a public defender still wet behind the ears." "Oh, Ben, this is it's sad. You're a child." She shook her head, still chuckling. "You're bringing a butter knife to a gunfight." "All rise!" The bailiff's voice boomed through the room. Isabella's smile widened. "Showtime," she whispered. She turned her back straight and confident and glided back to her team, back to her lawyer, back to my daughter. I stood up slowly, my old bones aching. She was right. She had an army. I was alone. I just hoped Jonathan hadn't forgotten the lesson about Gettysburg. "All rise." The bailiff's voice was a dull, indifferent drone. The Honorable Judge Miles presiding. We stood. At least I tried to. My knees cracked in protest. I felt 70 years old. I felt 1,000 years old. I felt small in my 20-year-old brown wool suit, the one I saved for funerals. Across the aisle they rose like a single elegant entity. Isabella in a sharp cream-colored suit, my daughter Emily looking bored in expensive black, my son-in-law Patrick looking smug, and their lawyer Mr. Shaw, who looked like he cost more than my house. They looked like a winning team. I looked like a man who had wandered in off the street. Judge Miles sat. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, her face etched with the weariness of seeing too many broken families. She looked down at the docket, then at Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw, I see you are representing the petitioner, Mrs. Carter. I am, Your Honor, and we are hoping for a swift resolution today. The judge nodded, then turned her gaze to me. Her eyes softened with what I recognized instantly. Pity. It was the look I had been getting for weeks. The look of a woman observing a lost cause. And you, Mr. Carter, she said, her voice gentle. The court has not received a notice of appearance. Are you representing yourself this morning? This was it. The moment. I could feel Isabella's stare. I could feel her smirk. She was waiting for me to stammer, to shuffle my feet, to fold. I looked at her, at my wife, at my daughter who was suddenly very interested in her fingernails, at Patrick who was whispering to Shaw, probably making a joke at my expense. I thought of the audio recording, a non-person. I thought of the Battle of Gettysburg. Stop defending. Attack. I gripped the smooth, worn handle of my old leather briefcase. No, Your Honor, I said. My voice was clear. It didn't shake. It cut through the low murmur of the courtroom. I am not. Judge Miles raised an eyebrow. Oh, your counsel is running late, Mr. Carter. Across the aisle, Isabella scoffed a tiny, sharp puff of air. Mr. Shaw let out an audible sigh of impatience, a performance for the judge. Your Honor, Shaw began, already rising to his feet. If my client's husband is attempting some sort of last-minute stalling tactic, and that is when the courtroom doors flew open. They didn't just open. They flew open, swinging wide and hitting the marble walls with two deafening whams that echoed like cannon fire. Every single person in the room, including Judge Miles, flinched and turned. He stood there for a beat, silhouetted against the bright light of the hallway. He was not just a man. He was a presence. He was 6'4" at least, and wore a suit of dark shark gray wool that looked like it had been sculpted onto his frame. It was a suit that probably cost more than my car. His shoes shined. His hair, the messy, defiant hair of a 15-year-old, was now cut short, sharp, and perfect. He was not alone. Behind him, 4 other people entered in a practiced silent formation. 2 men, 2 women, all in identical severe black suits, all carrying thick leather briefcases. And behind them came the carts. 2 paralegals pushing large, heavy metal document carts, the kind you see in old movies about the Supreme Court. The wheels made a low, rumbling, expensive sound on the marble floor. Rumble. 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 The courtroom was dead silent. The only sound was the squeak and rumble of those wheels. They were loaded, stacked high with dozens of thick 3-ring binders. Binders labeled in sharp black text. Financials. Carter Joint. Financials. IC Enterprises. Financials. P&E Consulting. Financials. Shaw Gregory. Every head turned. Judge Miles's jaw was literally physically open. She stared not at the carts, but at the man who was now walking down the aisle. She knew exactly who this was. I looked across the aisle. Mr. Shaw, Isabella's high-priced, arrogant lawyer, had gone white as a sheet of paper. His hand was limp at his side. His expensive Mont Blanc pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the wooden table. Click, clack, clack. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I looked at my daughter. Emily had finally looked up from her phone. Her hand was over her mouth. She grabbed her mother's arm. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. Mom, that's Jonathan Rook." And then I looked at my wife, Isabella. She was frozen. She was a statue of cream-colored silk. Her face, which had been so smug and confident, had drained of all color, all life. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She knew him. Of course she knew him. In her world of high-stakes Chicago real estate, this man was a legend. He was the monster they told stories about in hushed, terrified tones at cocktail parties. The man who didn't just win cases, he liquidated assets. He destroyed empires. He was the shark. Her mind was racing. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't thinking about the case. She was doing the math. $50,000 retainer. He can't. He's a teacher. He's broke. I heard her voice. It wasn't her strong, cold command. It was a tiny, strangled, pathetic gasp. No. No, it's not possible. Where did he get the money? Jonathan Rook reached my table. He didn't look at Isabella. He didn't look at Shaw. He didn't look at anyone but me. He put his hand on my shoulder. The same shoulder he had cried on in my basement office 30 years ago. His grip was firm. It was an anchor. It sent strength through my entire body. He smiled, just a small, sharp lifting at the corner of his mouth. Then he turned to the bench. "Good morning, Your Honor," his voice boomed, filling every corner of the room with absolute authority. "Jonathan Rook from the Rook Law Group." He gestured to his team, who were already unpacking laptops and placing massive, threatening binders on the table. "I apologize for our delay. We were just finalizing the criminal referrals." He looked at Judge Miles. "I am representing Mr. Benjamin Carter." I looked at Isabella. She looked like she was about to be sick. I took a deep, steady breath. Class was now in session. "All rise." The bailiff's voice was a dull, indifferent drone. The Honorable Judge Miles presiding. We stood. At least I tried to. My knees cracked in protest. I felt 70 years old. I felt 1,000 years old. I felt small in my 20-year-old brown wool suit, the one I saved for funerals. Across the aisle they rose like a single elegant entity. Isabella in a sharp cream-colored suit. My daughter Emily looking bored in expensive black. My son-in-law Patrick looking smug. And their lawyer Mr. Shaw, who looked like he cost more than my house. They looked like a winning team. I looked like a man who had wandered in off the street. Judge Miles sat. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, her face etched with the weariness of seeing too many broken families. She looked down at the docket, then at Mr. Shaw. "Mr. Shaw, I see you are representing the petitioner, Mrs. Carter. I am Your Honor, and we are hoping for a swift resolution today." The judge nodded, then turned her gaze to me. Her eyes softened with what I recognized instantly. Pity. It was the look I had been getting for weeks. The look of a woman observing a lost cause. "And you, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice gentle. "The court has not received a notice of appearance. Are you representing yourself this morning?" This was it. The moment. I could feel Isabella's stare. I could feel her smirk. She was waiting for me to stammer, to shuffle my feet, to fold. I looked at her, at my wife, at my daughter who was suddenly very interested in her fingernails, at Patrick who was whispering to Shaw, probably making a joke at my expense. I thought of the audio recording, a non-person. I thought of the Battle of Gettysburg. Stop defending. Attack. I gripped the smooth, worn handle of my old leather briefcase. "No, Your Honor," I said. My voice was clear. It didn't shake. It cut through the low murmur of the courtroom. "I am not." Judge Miles raised an eyebrow. "Oh, your counsel is running late, Mr. Carter." Across the aisle, Isabella scoffed a tiny, sharp puff of air. Mr. Shaw let out an audible sigh of impatience, a performance for the judge. "Your Honor," Shaw began, already rising to his feet. "If my client's husband is attempting some sort of last-minute stalling tactic." And that is when the courtroom doors flew open. They didn't just open. They flew open, swinging wide and hitting the marble walls with two deafening whams that echoed like cannon fire. Every single person in the room, including Judge Miles, flinched and turned. He stood there for a beat, silhouetted against the bright light of the hallway. He was not just a man. He was a presence. He was 6'4" at least, and wore a suit of dark, shark gray wool that looked like it had been sculpted onto his frame. It was a suit that probably cost more than my car. His shoes shined. His hair, the messy, defiant hair of a 15-year-old, was now cut short, sharp, and perfect. He was not alone. Behind him, 4 other people entered in a practiced silent formation. 2 men, 2 women, all in identical severe black suits, all carrying thick leather briefcases. And behind them came the carts. 2 paralegals pushing large, heavy metal document carts. The kind you see in old movies about the Supreme Court. The wheels made a low, rumbling, expensive sound on the marble floor. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The courtroom was dead silent. The only sound was the squeak and rumble of those wheels. They were loaded, stacked high with dozens of thick 3-ring binders. Binders labeled in sharp black text. Financials, Carter Joint. Financials, IC. Enterprises. Financials, P&E Consulting. Financials, Shaw Gregory. Every head turned. Judge Miles's jaw was literally physically open. She stared not at the carts, but at the man who was now walking down the aisle. She knew exactly who this was. I looked across the aisle. Mr. Shaw Isabella's high-priced, arrogant lawyer had gone white as a sheet of paper. His hand was limp at his side. His expensive Mont Blanc pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the wooden table. Click, clack, clack. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I looked at my daughter. Emily had finally looked up from her phone. Her hand was over her mouth. She grabbed her mother's arm. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. Mom, that's Jonathan Rook." And then I looked at my wife. Isabella. She was frozen. She was a statue of cream-colored silk. Her face, which had been so smug and confident, had drained of all color, all life. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She knew him. Of course she knew him. In her world of high-stakes Chicago real estate, this man was a legend. He was the monster they told stories about in hushed, terrified tones at cocktail parties. The man who didn't just win cases, he liquidated assets. He destroyed empires. He was the shark. Her mind was racing. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't thinking about the case. She was doing the math. $50,000 retainer. He can't. He's a teacher. He's broke. I heard her voice. It wasn't her strong, cold command. It was a tiny, strangled, pathetic gasp. No. No, it's not possible. Where did he get the money? Jonathan Rook reached my table. He didn't look at Isabella. He didn't look at Shaw. He didn't look at anyone but me. He put his hand on my shoulder. The same shoulder he had cried on in my basement office 30 years ago. His grip was firm. It was an anchor. It sent strength through my entire body. He smiled, just a small, sharp lifting at the corner of his mouth. Then he turned to the bench. "Good morning, Your Honor." His voice boomed, filling every corner of the room with absolute authority. "Jonathan Rook from the Rook Law Group." He gestured to his team, who were already unpacking laptops and placing massive, threatening binders on the table. "I apologize for our delay. We were just finalizing the criminal referrals." He looked at Judge Miles. "I am representing Mr. Benjamin Carter." I looked at Isabella. She looked like she was about to be sick. I took a deep, steady breath. Class was now in session. "Your Honor, Jonathan Rook from the Rook Law Group. I apologize for our delay. We were just finalizing the criminal referrals. I am representing Mr. Benjamin Carter." Judge Miles leaned forward. She looked stunned. Mr. Mr. Rook. Welcome. I wasn't aware you handled family law. I don't, Your Honor. Jonathan said, his voice like ice. I handle financial law. And fraud. Which is what this case is actually about. Across the aisle, Mr. Shaw, Isabella's lawyer, finally found his voice. He stood up, shuffling his papers, trying to regain his composure. Your Honor, objection. This is highly irregular. This is a simple, uncontested divorce proceeding. My client has made a generous offer. Mr. Carter has agreed to sign. We are just here at his request to put it on the record. Shaw was trying to regain control, to frame me as the one holding things up. Jonathan Rook didn't even look at him. He addressed the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Shaw is mistaken. This is not a simple divorce. It is not uncontested. And it is certainly not generous. He gestured to one of his associates, who placed a thick red binder on the judge's bench. It is, in fact, a conspiracy. A multi-year systematic conspiracy to commit financial fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft against my client. And the petitioner, Isabella Carter, along with her co-conspirators, Mr. Patrick Hayes and Mrs. Emily Hayes, have been actively plotting to strip Mr. Carter of his assets, his rights, and his very personhood. The courtroom was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Shaw was sputtering. Your Honor, these are baseless, outrageous accusations. This is character assassination. Is it, Mr. Shaw? Rook's voice was dangerously quiet. Then let's talk about the facts. He turned, and it was like he was a professor in front of a lecture hall. My lecture hall. The petitioner, Mrs. Carter, claims her joint retirement fund of approximately $1 million was lost in the market, leaving only $50,000. That's correct, Shaw said, seizing on it. A tragic market loss. A lie, Rook snapped. The word cut through the air. Exhibit A. He nodded to his team. Copies for the court and for counsel. These are the wire transfer records from Mr. Carter's joint account authorized by his son-in-law, Mr. Patrick Hayes, who conveniently is an accountant. He held up a single sheet of paper. They weren't market losses, Your Honor. They were wire transfers totaling $1.8 million moved systematically over 5 years to an unregistered offshore shell corporation in the Cayman Islands named IC Enterprises. He held up another document. A corporation whose sole signatory is the petitioner Isabella Carter. I looked at Isabella. She was holding onto the table. Her knuckles were white. She was no longer a predator. She was prey. Your Honor. Shaw was on his feet, sweating. This is privileged financial information. It's inadmissible. It was obtained with a legal authorization signed by my client, Mr. Carter, the co-owner of the accounts they drained. Rook countered smoothly. He has a right to know where his money went. He didn't stop. He was relentless. And where did it go? Your Honor, let's follow the money. Exhibit B, wire transfers out of IC Enterprises. A transfer for $500,000 for the purchase of a beach villa in Costa Rica. A villa purchased by a Panamanian holding company named G&B Properties. Rook paused, letting the judge absorb it. We were curious about G&B, so we checked. The owners are listed as Gregory and Isabella. We assume Gregory is Mr. Gregory Shaw, her attorney, sitting right there. Shaw looked like he had been shot. He collapsed into his chair. And then, Rook continued, there is Exhibit C, a transfer for $300,000 from IC Enterprises to another LLC, P&E Consulting. He turned his gaze on my daughter, Emily, who was now visibly shaking, her face pale. An LLC, Your Honor, whose registered agents are Patrick and Emily Hayes, my client's son-in-law, and my client's daughter, paid $300,000 of her father's stolen money to buy her silence while her parents, her co-conspirators, planned to throw her father onto the street with nothing. Emily let out a small, strangled sob. This, Rook boomed, is textbook fraud, but it gets worse. He gestured to his associate, who handed him a small digital audio player. They had a plan B, Your Honor, in case Mr. Carter, the confused old man, refused to sign away his life. Objection, Shaw yelled, finding his voice. Illegal recording. Legally obtained, Mr. Shaw, Rook countered. From a separate active fraud investigation into your other client, Mr. Patrick Hayes. We have the warrants. This is the evidence. He pressed play, and the courtroom filled with Patrick's cold, clinical voice. We'll get a friendly doctor. We'll suggest he has early-onset Alzheimer's. In 2 months, with my testimony, we can have a judge declare him incompetent. He loses his civil rights. He can't hire a lawyer. He can't testify. He becomes a non-person, and the problem just goes away. The audio recording clicked off. Patrick's voice, cold and clinical, hung in the heavy, silent air of the courtroom. He becomes a non-person. I watched Judge Miles. She was a woman who had seen the worst of humanity. I knew that. But this was new. She slowly, deliberately took off her reading glasses. She placed them on her desk. She didn't look at Rook. She didn't look at me. She stared with an expression of pure, unfiltered disgust at my family. She stared at my wife, Isabella. She stared at my son-in-law, Patrick. And she stared at my daughter, Emily. Her face was pale. She looked at them like they were something she had found crawling out from under a rock. Across the aisle, the smug confidence was gone. It had evaporated. Mr. Shaw, Isabella's lover and lawyer, was shuffling his papers, but his hands were shaking. Patrick looked gray, his tie suddenly too tight. Emily was already crying, silent, terrified tears rolling down her pale cheeks. Jonathan Rook stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His voice was a cold, precise weapon that filled every corner of the room. Your Honor, he said. Mr. Shaw, in his opening, called this a simple divorce proceeding. He was wrong. It is not. He gestured to the carts piled high with binders that his team had wheeled in. It is a calculated multi-year conspiracy to commit felony fraud against a senior citizen. It is a conspiracy to illegally move assets, my client's life savings, offshore. It is a conspiracy involving wire fraud expertly orchestrated by Mr. Patrick Hayes, who conveniently is an accountant. He gestured to Mr. Shaw, who flinched. It involves collusion with the petitioner's lover, Mr. Gregory Shaw, who is also, in a shocking and disgusting breach of ethics, her counsel of record. He took a breath. And this is when he delivered the killing blow. But worse than all that, Your Honor, as you just heard, it is a conspiracy to fraudulently strip a man of his civil liberties, to have him declared incompetent, a non-person, for the sole purpose of stealing what was left of his life. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. This is not family law, Your Honor. This is a criminal enterprise. Jonathan turned slightly, his back to me, facing them. Therefore, the defense requests the following immediately. 1. That the petitioner's fraudulent request for divorce be dismissed with prejudice. 2. We ask this court for an immediate summary judgment, placing a hard freeze on all assets, domestic and international, belonging to the petitioner, Isabella Carter. He didn't stop. He turned his gaze cold as ice on my daughter. And 3, we ask that the freeze be extended to all assets, accounts, and properties held by her known co-conspirators, Patrick Hayes and Emily Hayes. The sound my daughter made was not a word. It was a wail, a high, thin animal sound of pure terror. No, no, Dad, no. Patrick, the smug clinical accountant, the man who had called me Dad Ben. He lunged forward. He wasn't reaching for a document. He wasn't objecting. He made a deep gagging sound, his hand flying to his mouth. He grabbed the small metal trash can next to Shaw's desk, bent double, and was violently, horribly sick. But Isabella, my wife of 40 years, She just stared. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. She looked at Rook. She looked at me. I could see her mind racing, calculating. She saw the 1.8 million. She saw the villa in Costa Rica. She saw the 40 years of lies. She saw the jail cell. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She tried to stand, perhaps to protest, her hand gripping the table. And then she just collapsed. She crumpled sideways, a boneless heap of expensive cream-colored silk sliding right off the bench and onto the courtroom floor in a dead faint. "Bailiff, see to Mrs. Carter." Judge Miles ordered, her voice shaking, not with weakness, but with absolute fury. Mr. Shaw, the lover, the lawyer, was paralyzed. He just stared at Isabella on the floor, his own world burning to the ground. Judge Miles looked at Rook. Then she looked at me. The pity was gone from her eyes. It was replaced with something else, a profound, steely respect. She lifted her gavel. "Mr. Rook," she said, her voice ringing with authority, "your requests are in their entirety granted. The petition for divorce is dismissed. An immediate binding freeze is hereby placed on all listed assets of Isabella Carter, Patrick Hayes, and Emily Hayes. This court is formally referring this entire disgusting file to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal prosecution." She locked eyes with Mr. Shaw. "And I am referring you to the State Bar for disbarment. Get out of my courtroom." The gavel cracked down like a gunshot. "We are adjourned." It was over. I stood up slowly. My knees still ached, but the weight of a lifetime had been lifted from my shoulders. Daddy, wait!" Emily ran toward me, hysterical, her face a red, blotchy mess of tears and mascara. She grabbed the sleeve of my old brown suit. "Dad, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know about the guardianship. I swear Patrick he said it was a loan from Mom, a gift. I didn't know." I stopped. I looked at my daughter, my little girl. I looked right into her eyes. I saw the terror. I saw the regret. But I also saw the lie. The same lie she had told herself. I pulled my arm free from her grasp, gently but with a finality that was absolute. "You took the $300,000, Emily," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a judge's sentence. "You knew. You knew." I turned my back on her. I turned my back on all of them. Jonathan was waiting by the door, holding my old tweed coat. He placed it over my shoulders. We pushed open the heavy courtroom doors and walked out of the darkness into the bright, sunlit hallway. We walked in silence for a long time, the only sound our footsteps on the marble floor. Finally, Jonathan looked at me. The cold predator's mask was gone. I just saw Johnny Rook, my student. "How do you feel, Teacher Carter?" he asked. I stopped. I looked out the massive window at the Chicago skyline. I took my first real breath in 40 years. I smiled. "I feel," I said, "like the first day of school after summer vacation, Jonathan. A new beginning." If you're listening to these stories, you probably think they only happen in movies. But I'm here, a 70-year-old man, to tell you that betrayal is real, and it almost always comes from the people who share your bed or sit at your dinner table. The biggest lesson I learned, my friends, is this. Always trust your gut. That twisting feeling in your stomach, that little itch in the back of your mind that tells you something isn't right. It's almost always correct. The people you love the most will look you right in the eye and lie. They will tell you it's just a phase. They will say they are just trying to help you. They will tell you that you're worrying too much, that you're getting confused. They will make you feel crazy for asking the questions. Don't believe them. Believe your gut. And the second lesson, the most important one. Your gut is not enough. You need proof. They are counting on you being just a confused old man, someone too trusting or too tired to fight. Do not give them that. Act in secret. Install that camera. Hire that private investigator. Check those bank records. You cannot win a war without weapons. Never ever confront them without undeniable, cold, hard proof. And be prepared. Because the truth, the truth is always, always worse than you suspected. You think it's a small lie, it's a conspiracy. You think it's neglect, it's torture. You think it's greed, it's a plan to destroy you completely. If this story touched your heart, if you have ever felt betrayed or underestimated, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And subscribe to the channel. I have more stories to tell. Stories of hidden truths and stories of last-minute justice. Most importantly, let me know your story in the comments below. Where are you watching this from? What time is it where you are? Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was wrong? And what did you do about it? Share your experience. Sometimes knowing we are not alone is the greatest strength we have. Thank you for listening.